Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
Izuna looked gloomily at the equally gloomy Tobirama. Trees and meteorites were falling around, explosions shook the air and the ground shook. The members of the Uchiha and Senju clans, surprisingly, had scattered as a group away from the battlefield of the two clan heads. Well, they had been trying to come to an agreement for an hour now. Izuna had been thinking about peace for a long time. The relationship between Hashirama and Madara, bogged down by circumstances, the rivalry between Izuna and Tobirama, drawn out to the point of impossibility, the endless deaths and battles. It was time to end it. And he didn't have the hatred for Senju that his father had so carefully nurtured. In childhood, there was a naive desire to please his father, to live up to his expectations, then the desire to protect his sometimes naive brother. Breathtaking fights with Tobirama, making you gasp with delight, with the fierce joy that there is someone equal to you, someone who understands you in battle with one blow. And responds in kind. Reveals himself to you with all his might, forcing you to splash out all the fire that was hidden in your soul in response. How many chances did Tobirama have to kill Izuna who accidentally revealed himself? How many times could Izuna kill Tobirama? Not to mention Madara and Hashirama and the sometimes outright pleasure on their faces during battles. It is worth noting that the members of both clans showed rare unanimity, preferring not to even look at their leaders. That's why Izuna wrote Tobirama a letter. Long, well-reasoned, with predictions and analysis, in short, something that was not expected from the usually reckless Uchiha. Izuna would have paid dearly to see Tobirama's face when he read it. It must have been a marvelous sight. Uchiha Izuna described in detail why they should conclude a peace treaty, how exactly they should force the hottest heads to calm down, what benefits such a scenario promises and what problems may arise. And asked for help in making their older brother's dreams come true. The letter was sent with a summoning cat. Izuna had long noticed that Tobirama was partial to cats. He noticed, oddly enough, during the battle Tobirama was looking at the Nico with unusual attention and thoughtfulness. Some people would have found this look threatening, but Hashirama almost snorted cheerfully, noticing this look, and suggested that his Otudo get a cat after all. Cat lover Tobirama. Izuna chuckled. Maybe if they could make this damn deal, give Senju a kitten? Tobirama replied with a short note through the cat. This should be discussed face to face at our next meeting. Izuna nodded to himself. Well, of course, it was better not to trust such conversations to paper. True, Tobirama very diplomatically called a meeting a skirmish, a bloody battle, which turned into a real circus. Somehow they both forgot that when Madara and Hashirama fight, there is no peace. Around, as already said, it seemed like the earth itself was exploding. Madara's meteorites were flying, Hashirama's wood techniques were tearing the earth apart with a terrible crash. The clanmates ran away, and he and Tobirama tried to talk. Yes, of course, Izuna could read lips, as could every dojutsu user. And show me a shinobi who couldn't read lips, it was a must-have skill. Tobirama could do it for sure. And there was also sign language, which shinobi could use to have long, detailed conversations if necessary. But still, such a sensitive topic as the peace treaty between the Senju and the Uchiha was best discussed in a calm environment, in silence, and without extra ears. Wincing from another explosion that sounded too quickly, Izuna decided that they needed to move their meeting to some other, neutral territory. For example, to that abandoned house in the forest, where he sometimes took a break from the overly stupid clanmates. Or to some civilian settlement where there were no shinobi. Tobirama, also grimacing with displeasure, with a simple gesture suggested going to the forest, which miraculously survived the first clash between Madara and Hashirama. Izuna glanced doubtfully at the forest. Well, like a forest. A small forest. A grove. A dozen or so trees with stunted crowns and surprisingly tenacious bushes. Okay, maybe this really wasn't a bad idea. And Izuna didn't see any people nearby. Although the background noise from his older brothers was overwhelming all sensory input, Izuna hoped that at least the Uchiha had run away further than this small forest. And Senju will be knocked down when he sees Tobirama's gloomy face. The forest turned out to be unexpectedly cozy. And even quiet. Relatively. But at least it was possible to have a normal conversation. So, Tobarama crossed his arms over his chest. You wanted to talk about a truce? Truce? Screw the truce, Izuna grinned wryly. I'm talking about a full-fledged peace between our clans, building a common village and even, horror of horrors, mixing blood. Mixing? Uchiha and Senju? Do you realize what you're talking about? Do you really think that's possible? That the clans would agree? The clan does what the leader tells it to do, provided that the elders support it, or at least don't object to it, Uchiha sighed. The elders? It's a serious threat, but I suppose it can be dealt with. Right now, Tobarama, the problem is your consent. I didn't come here to make empty talk. Everything I think, you should have read in the letter. Tobarama narrowed his eyes slightly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Izuna considered it a residual reaction to the shock from his letter. Tobarama, I gave you the numbers. My observations confirm them, we are dying out. The heavy words fell between them like another of Madara's meteorites. There are fewer of us born than there are dying. Both Uchiha and Senju. I wonder how you managed to collect statistics on our clan, Tobarama said dryly. Kami, Tobarama, it's not that difficult, the Uchiha rolled his eyes. The summoning, the Sharingan, frequent fights involving half the clan, information from the civilians you interact with. I'm surprised you did such a job. I've been preparing for this conversation. I'll bet a broken Senbon against Madara's Gunbai you did the same job on the Uchiha. Tobarama remained silent, only raising his chin a little higher. We're dying out, Izuna repeated. I checked, other clans don't have this. Akimichi, Nara, Yamanaka, they stick together, they have a lot of numbers. And if they all came at us, even a fighter like Madara could be overwhelmed by a crowd. But if we unite, like them, we'll be strong enough not to fear such threats. What do you expect from me? Tobarama looked him in the eye. Surprisingly, he wasn't even afraid of the Sharingan. However, Izuna wasn't going to cast Genjutsu. His main weapon now was frankness. Let's say I agree. What next? Next? Izuna raised an eyebrow in response. Next, to make a plan to process our Aniki and to disable the elders. Because I doubt that they will agree so easily. Our brothers are strong, they are the heads of the clans, but they need support. They will not be able to realize their dream alone. Are you doing this for him? For your brother? Senju asked quietly after a pause. Izuna looked away. Well, honesty to the end. Madara fades. He wears himself out in battle, burning brighter for Hashirama. But at home, in the clan, he closes himself off. Turns himself into a weapon. Hides his soul, himself, his desires and dreams. He still opens up to me, but more often than not, I'm met with a wall. Stop. Tobarama raised both hands. His eyes were slightly widened, which, given his usually indifferent face, seemed to indicate profound shock. Uchiha, do you realize what you're saying? What kind of world would it be if there was no honesty? He shrugged in response. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm trying here, opening my soul, and you're making faces at me here. Tobarama blinked twice quickly. He formed the word Kai. Izuna continued to look away, frowning and slightly pouting. Madara usually gave up after 30 seconds, looking at the pouting and offended Otudo. The others took about 20 seconds. It was interesting to see if the offended cutie modus would work on Tobarama. It took effect in a minute and a half. Tobarama took a deep breath, relaxing and lowering his scrutinizing gaze. Strong, Izuna thought with respect. Even if we manage to convince our elder brothers, even if we remove the elders, there will still be enough in the clans for whom blood feud will be too compelling a reason not to stop the war. Well, I can take care of all the idiots on our side, Izuna responded. I guarantee they'll calm down. I'm counting on your powers of persuasion, Tobarama snorted sarcastically. Hope so, Uchiha smiled broadly. If you want, I can test it on your idiots. Do you think we have them? Where aren't they? Tobarama almost chuckled cheerfully. Izuna rejoiced. After all, it was possible to make this ice block express emotions, it was possible. He had long suspected that Tobarama was no less, if not more, emotional than his older brother. He just carefully hid it, suppressed it. He had built a dam inside himself, blocking the path of the turbulent river of his feelings. But one day this dam could collapse, and the stream would sweep away all the walls and masks to the yokai. And it would splash out, causing only pain. But if the restrictions were gradually removed, Izuna did not know what made him constantly pester, shake Tobarama. Each time, to fight only with him alone, to notice any changes in appearance, carefully, bit by bit, collect any manifestations of character, true nature, rejoice at every splash of feelings directed in his direction. To be his only enemy. Unique, necessary, desired. Okay, can we consider that we have an agreement? Let's start making our common evil plans, Tobarama? Izuna smiled with anticipation. Working together. This should be interesting. Tobarama chuckled almost cheerfully. Then suddenly he frowned, listening to something. Izuna also tensed up. If the sensor was making such a face, then something was wrong. Although his Sharingan didn't detect anything like that, but you never know? There's someone here. Izuna immediately activated Manjikyu, looking around. He frowned in confusion. There is no one here. I feel someone's presence. I'm not going to underestimate your sensory skills, but my Sharingan isn't just for show. Izuna slowly turned around his axis. There's no one here. Yes, Senju exhaled briefly and through his teeth, forming a concentration seal. You sense it through Senjutsu, right? Izuna drawled thoughtfully. He hesitated, then raised his hand to his face. Just in case, this isn't an attack. Kuchios no Jutsu. In a cloud of white smoke, a small red cat appeared in front of Izuna, licking its paw with dignity. It cast a short, haughty glance at its summoner and continued to make itself up. Izuna noticed Tobarama's even more thoughtful look out of the corner of his eye, and mentally snorted he definitely needed to give him a kitten later. In the meantime, let him admire the inviting kitty. This particular impudent creature was called a KO. And despite his modest size, he had every right to be the embodiment of impudence and arrogance. For he was a unique sensor, beating even the owners of Dojutsu dry. Izuna crouched down in front of the cat, regretting that he hadn't grabbed anything tasty for him. But who knew? Listen, Akeo, Uchiha began immediately. 2 fresh tuna, and you're telling me who else, besides the 2 of us, is holed up in this grove. TRRRY tuna, the cat purred, squinting slyly. Tobarama chuckled. 3, so 3, Izuna agreed accommodatingly. And a bowl of first-class cream. Today. Well, how can I resist? Akeo stretched with pleasure. To your left, 5 human steps away. Smaller than you. Mriao, cub. At that very moment, the branches rustled, and Tobarama rushed towards the sound like a hound. Izuna thanked the cat, stroked him and scratched him behind the ear before he left with a return call. He saw no point in running after Tobarama, he would only get in the way. Besides, he returned almost immediately, holding a child in a yukata in his outstretched arms. The child did not flutter, did not whine, did not cry, just dangled silently in his outstretched arms, like a rag doll. Izuna looked at him with his Sharingan. An unusual child. Ordinary children of about 5 or 6 years old do not hide their chakra so skillfully. Upon closer inspection, the child turned out to be a boy with long dark hair and large, frightened eyes of a strange amber color with a vertical pupil. He was pale and thin, awkwardly shifting his bare feet on the grass when Tobarama carefully put him down. What's your name? Did someone send you to follow us? Tobarama looked sternly, and had no intention of being touched by the round cheeks and frightened eyes. Izuna, in general, did too, because he remembered too well how in his childhood he himself had tricked adults with the same kawaii face for treats and training. But this particular kid didn't look like a spy or even a shinobi at all. Are you lost? Don't be afraid, we won't hurt you, Izuna smiled charmingly. Where are your relatives? The child sniffled, lowering his head. Are you an orphan? The baby nodded and sniffed again. How did you end up here? The boy shrugged. Izuna exchanged glances with Tobarama. The kid didn't look like a civilian, not with such big eyes. Perhaps from some small clan. He got separated from his clan, got lost, accidentally ended up on the battlefield of Uchiha and Senju, got scared and hid in a grove. It sounded logical. Having shared his thoughts with Tobirama, Izuna smiled at the child again. Baby, do you have anyone? Guardians, a clan? The baby continued to sniffle and blink his snake eyes sadly. Izuna sighed. Impulsive decisions could cause serious harm, therefore, he tried to control his impulsiveness, which had caused him a lot of trouble in his childhood. However, if the crazy idea that suddenly came to his mind would not cause harm to the clan in general and to him and Madara in particular, why not? And those who were dissatisfied could always be sent to hell with Katon. If you want, you can come with me, Izuna smiled at the child who raised his head in surprise. What are you doing? Tobirama said quietly but tensely. Do you want to take someone unknown into the clan? This is someone you won't be able to send as Kato. First of all, not an unknown person, but a lost child who could have suffered because of our clans. Izuna smiled encouragingly at the baby and stretched out his arms. Will you come into my arms? The boy looked warily, sniffed again and hesitantly took a couple of steps towards her. Secondly, Izuna picked him up in his arms, turning to Tobirama. Madara definitely won't be against it. He no, but the elders and other members of the clan yes. What good is a clan leader if the clan doesn't listen to him? Uchiha snorted. Or do the Senju not trust their leader at all? What are you hinting at? Tobirama's face hardened even more than usual. Izuna looked at him with pity. If Hashirama could really make the Senju obey, we wouldn't have to negotiate here in secret. Because Madara only has to bark and the Uchiha will march in orderly formation to make peace. Apparently, Hashirama can't do that. You. Tobirama's eyes flashed angrily. Hashirama is a much better clan leader than your brother. The fact that the Uchiha are afraid of Madara is no reason to consider him a good leader. Quiet, don't scare the child, Izuna looked reproachfully at Tobirama, stroking the boy's back, who had buried his face in his hair. He smiled at him. Well, don't be afraid of Tobirama. He's not evil at all. He just has a bad character, but otherwise he's sweet and kind. Just like a kitten. Kitty snorted in displeasure, continuing to glare at Izuna. Tobirama, calm down, Izuna sighed. The conversation was starting to tire him. It was time to go. And the brothers had already stopped comparing who had more chakra and the coolest jutsu. I'm dragging this kid to us, not to you. I doubt that a 5-year-old child can harm adult shinobi. Or do you doubt us that much? Are you teasing so subtly? Or are you just making fun of us? Receiving another disgruntled look and a snort in response, Izuna vowed to find Tobirama the most adorable and most evil cat. Chuckling, he adjusted the baby in his arms. Okay, unfortunately, our time for conversation has come to an end. The brothers have already finished, so let's go our separate ways. I hope we've already agreed? Agreed, Senju nodded briefly. I'll think about my next steps and write to you. It will be interesting to see how you deliver this letter to me. Tobirama disappeared into Shunshin's cloud, and Izuna, smiling at the curiously blinking child, headed towards Madara's bright chakra fire. Don't be afraid of my brother, Izuna told him. He looks scary too, but he's actually more of a cat than Tobirama. You'll get along, I'm sure. The child blinked his snake eyes. Izuna stroked his hair. You look like a little snake, the boy perked up and nodded. Maybe that's what I should call you? Or will you tell me your name? The boy froze in confusion. Can't tell? Izuna asked softly. Well, the shock might make him lose his voice. He'll come around, thaw out, feel safe and then he'll start talking. But just in case, we need to show the medic mean. Natsum, of course, isn't Hashirama, but he can still do something. Then I'll call you Hebe Dash, Izuna lightly flicked him on the nose, smiling affectionately. He loved to mess around with the kids in the clan, although he usually had little time for it. Oddly enough, Madara also got along well with the kids, who were not afraid of him at all. Until the children grew up. That's why Izuna was completely sure that Madara would allow him to keep the foundling, and no one would dare to say a word to him. The power of the clan leader, as the strongest shinobi, is based on respect and strength. And strength here means not only cool techniques, but also will, character. Unfortunately, Hashirama was still soft for his clansmen. But Madara is the opposite, the pressure of his aura is too strong, people cannot help but be afraid of him. And it was sad. Because fear blinds the eyes and prevents one from seeing one's true face. Izuna smiled at his brother, who was pulling off his battered armor. The Uchiha, who were approaching their leader very slowly, looked askance at the plowed valley and the armor that was completely destroyed. The fact that, given the scale of the battle, Madara looked relatively whole and even fresh was also impressive. And the fear in their eyes squeezed my heart. Izuna grabbed the child more tightly and walked towards his brother with a slight smile. You used to bring wolf cubs, kittens, chicks with broken wings, and now you've switched to people, Madara said thoughtfully, looking at Hibi. It's good that they're alive. If you'd brought a corpse, I wouldn't have been very happy. Izuna snorted indignantly. They were having a quiet dinner in their home. The three of them, Izuna, Madara, and little Hibi. Immediately after the fight, Madara did not interrogate him about who this child was and why he was being dragged home. He nodded in response to his younger brother's laconic explanation. I found him, decided to take him into the clan, he is not dangerous, a rare Kekkei Genkai is possible. The clansman glanced at the child with curiosity, but refrained from asking questions. At home, there was no time for the baby either. Dealing with the wounded, calming down some of the clansmen who were still excited by the battle, taking into account how many consumables had been spent, whether there were enough medicines. Routine, in a word. Hibi was first hastily shoved into Natsum's arms, who, after quickly checking for the absence of serious injuries and contagious diseases, entrusted him to the care of Ayane, a weak kunoichi who cleaned and cooked in the clan leader's house. She was incredibly touched by the baby, immediately hugged him and fed him to her heart's content. That's why now, while Madara and Izuna, tired from running around and routine affairs, were devouring their dinner, the boy was modestly gnawing on cookies, washing them down with milk and staring at them with his yellow-green eyes. That's not necessary. What about those spies I caught and brought to you, tied up like sausages? In the Shibari style, which he had studied out of interest, but he couldn't mention it in front of a child. Spies. Madara snorted, picking up a piece of meat with his chopsticks. These don't count. It's their own fault they came to us. Izuna shrugged. The spies weren't from the Senju, they were from a visiting clan that he and Madara had visited later and thoroughly explained to them how bad it was to be impudent. But that wasn't relevant to the matter. We can't accept him into the clan. He's not an Uchiha. Izuna really didn't like how mechanically Madara spoke. He only hoped that it was a consequence of fatigue, and not emotional burnout. If you're talking about the Sharingan, we have people who never awakened it. Izuna finished the broth, transferring the dumplings to Madara's plate. He hadn't liked vegetable dumplings since childhood. And there are those who were accepted from outside as spouses, the blood still needed to be diluted, and small clans and lone shinobi were happy to become part of the great Uchiha clan. Hibi-chan can become a very strong shinobi. He definitely has a Kekkei Genkai. We don't know what clan he's from, Madara countered. Who, where, maybe he's a spy. It's suspicious that you were the only one who caught him when there were so many Uchiha hanging around. What were you doing in that area anyway? Otuto fidgeted, causing the scarlet eyes to narrow suspiciously in his direction. The red ones, however, were not at all because of the Sharingan, but because of the burst blood vessels. Izuna once again regretted that there was no competent doctor nearby to examine his brother. Manjikyu was a useful thing, but very problematic. You once asked me not to lie, Izuna said, chewing his lip. But I can't tell you yet. Are you planning something dangerous? You're acting up again, Otuto, Madara chuckled. The younger one snorted, secretly rejoicing. No, just tired. No more dangerous than your meteorites. What's with this habit, throwing all the strongest stuff right after the fight starts? Do you really need to impress Hashirama that much? He already knows how cool you are. And if you want to seduce him, then change your tactics. Aizachan, Madara narrowed his eyes, slamming his teacup down on the table. It seems like it's been a while since I've talked to anyone at the training grounds. I can't, I have a child, he quickly answered, moving closer to Hibi. He put his arm around his shoulders, smiling sweetly. Who else will take care of him if not me? Ain. And with great pleasure. You're cruel, Nichan, Izuna pouted, picking up Hebe. He thought about it and decided that he was completely offended. You're mean. I'll leave you, to put the baby to bed. And lie down yourself, Madara nodded. Smiling, he threw after him, if Tobirama could see how cute you look with a child in your arms. I've already seen it, I'm not impressed, Izuna almost answered, biting his tongue. He looked at Hebe and winked cheerfully. The little snake blinked drowsily, leaning against his shoulder. We've really tortured the kid. We scared him with the battle, we dragged him to God knows where. It's okay, you seem strong, Izuna purred, laying Hebe down in the guest room that Ain had prepared. He covered him with a blanket and gently touched the top of his dark-haired head with his lips. You'll grow up to be an even stronger shinobi. Don't worry about anything, you'll be taken care of here. After admiring the peacefully snoring child, Izuna went out, carefully closing the shoji doors. He leaned against them, closing his eyes tightly. His intuition quietly whispered that he had done everything absolutely right, bringing this child with snake eyes home. Maybe they were missing something. Him and Madara. And this child would help them realize and return something very important and necessary. I wish Tobirama would send me a reply already. I wonder how he plans to deliver it. Orochimaru considered himself a genius. And this was not arrogance or bragging on his part. He really was a genius. Even in his child form. Even playing with the Temari ball that the kind Uchiha Ain gave him. Orochimaru felt like an idiot. The strange seals in the Uzumaki underground cache he had dug up were unlike anything else, and their description was vague, fuzzy, and imprecise. And instead of trying to figure out exactly what they did, Orochimaru rushed to check them out himself. He didn't even send his test subjects ahead of him, or even tell Kabuto to dig around. Well, what could go wrong, he thought. It's unlikely that the Uzumaki would put some dangerous thing in the middle of their hideout, he thought. The description says, to find yourself and discover the secrets of the past, so what could go wrong, he decided and activated the seal. And here it is. Orochimaru looked sadly at the child's palms. All his medical knowledge screamed at the top of his voice that after turning into a child, his brain should also become childish, which means some knowledge should be lost, memory should fade, and mental abilities should become equal to the age of 7 or 8 years. This is what he was most afraid of after realizing that he had become a child and had moved to another place. The frantic self-examination was interrupted by the deafening noise of battle and 2 shinobi rushing past, cursing. Uchiha, Orochimaru automatically recognized the kamen on their backs. Then there were meteorites and powerful tree roots bursting out of the ground. Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara. Fuck. Orochimaru hid his chakra, glad that some of his abilities were still intact, and hid in a grove away from the fighting founders of Konoha. Which wasn't even in the plans yet. The conversation between Uchiha Izuna and Senju Tobirama was a huge shock. There was little information about Madara's younger brother. A strong shinobi, he died young, however, nothing surprising in the world of assassins. He awakened Manjikyu along with his brother. After his death, Uchiha Madara went on a rampage, almost killed half of the Uchiha and all of the Senju, but was defeated by Hashirama and formed an alliance with the Senju. Thus Konoha was founded. But it turns out that Uchiha Izuna himself wanted to make peace and even conspired with the future Nidaime. Orochimaru was so stunned that he completely missed it when Tobirama suspected his presence, coming to his senses only when the Niniko was summoned. He tried to run away, but could his current capabilities compare to those of a potential Kage? So Orochimaru resigned himself and decided to use the most terrible weapon he had in his possession in those years. With a terribly cute little face. Orochimaru's childhood coincided with the harsh post-war period. There were many orphans, and it was impossible to spoil each child. And yet, Orochimaru managed to stay in people's arms until he was 5. No one could resist his sad big eyes and round cheeks. Yes, with age, this aura of cuteness began to bother him greatly. Before it was replaced by an aura of attractiveness similar to the one that surrounded the unfortunate Uchiha Sasuke, Orochimaru began to actively create a repulsive image. Unpleasant grins, a long tongue, a hissing voice, an unkind, sly look. And then he completely became a missing mean, for whom cutting a person into organs is nothing. And the cute little boy who killed everyone with just one look remained only in the memories of Jiraiya and Tsunade. But right now it was worth putting on the image of a cute, frightened child and blinking at two formidable shinobi, radiating helplessness and charm with all my might. Not that it helped. Tobirama, for example, was not at all moved. And Uchiha Izuna, who wanted to take him with him and treated him surprisingly kindly, judging by his sly look, could do the same himself. Orochimaru chose the role of observer, listening and watching with wide eyes. The Uchiha brothers' conversation, the Kunoichi's immediate reaction, a quiet dinner with jokes. The Uchiha demons, feared and hated, admired and looked up to, were surprisingly human. Not that Orochimaru was all that surprised. After all, rumors rarely had anything to do with the truth, he knew that. Much more important, what to do next. Orochimaru sat on the Engawa, swinging his legs. Ain handed him a ball and sat him down on the veranda to wait for breakfast. In front of him was a backyard with carefully planted flower beds, fenced with white round stones. It looked cozy. Orochimaru tossed a temari, decorated with red and gold patterns on a black background. A bit gloomy for a real child. But he himself only vaguely remembered whether he had toys as a child. It seemed he had some, however, he began learning ninjutsu early. It was unlikely that he had time to play, like ordinary children. It was surprising that here in the Uchiha clan, the kids had the opportunity to play instead of training 24/7. Or was he given a break as a newcomer? Orochimaru threw the ball up, stretched out his arms to catch it, but his childish body let him down again. The ball fell to the side, and he didn't have time to catch it. A wide male palm completely embraced the temari. Uchiha Madara looked thoughtfully at the toy, then at Orochimaru, who blinked his eyes. Is it boring to play alone? Madara tilted his head to the side. Orochimaru silently shrugged. Okay, the clan leader sighed. He climbed up onto the Engawa, easily picked up the child, thrusting the toy into his hands. He shouted to the panicked Ain that she and Hebe would be in his office, bringing breakfast there. Sit with me while I sort out the papers. It won't be so boring, right? A slight smile surprisingly adorned his face. Orochimaru nodded, one hand clinging to Madara's neck. It wasn't that he doubted the Uchiha would be able to hold him back, it was just more reassuring. But he's still very young. 22 or 23 years old. And Izuna is even younger. One will die young, the other will go crazy with hatred, Orochimaru thought, folding cranes from the paper he was given for drawing. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to draw abstract children's drawings. What did the description of the seal say? Know yourself and reveal the secrets of the past? And how am I supposed to know myself in child form? Okay, there are some guesses here, I just need to think them over carefully. As for the secrets, this definitely concerns the conspiracy between Izuna and Tobirama. The question is, what should I do with it? If we leave things as they are, history may go down the familiar path. Izuna will be killed, Madara will go crazy, and so on. If I'm not mistaken, it was Senju Tobirama who killed Izuna. I wonder how that happened if they had a completely peaceful agreement? An accident? So many questions. And the most important one, should I interfere? On the one hand, I am just a child now, and it is unknown whether I will regain all my former abilities. And it is unknown whether I will return to my time, whether such a possibility exists in principle. And do I need it? Orochimaru never suffered from excessive humanism. Most people, in his opinion, did not deserve to be treated kindly. The researcher in him now claimed that this was a great opportunity to study the owners of dojutsu up close, as well as the future Shodame and Naidame. There was a chance, if, of course, he could restore his strength, to grab the Sharingan for himself, as well as Mokuton, and a bunch of interesting developments of Tobirama. Orochimaru had a hard time holding back a wide grin, which would have looked strange on a child's face. The calculating snake in him hissed that such an opportunity as reshaping the future in his favor should not be wasted. Even if he had to return to his own time, he could collect and hide so much valuable, the same Sharingan, for example. To grab Madara's Manjikyu, where did his eyes go after he took Izuna's Sharingan? To get into the past, when Konoha no longer exists, there is so much he can do. If only he could grow up a little, just a little. In principle, 13 or 14 years would be enough. At that age Orochimaru was already strong enough not to die while carrying out his plans. Madara-sama, your breakfast. Hibi-chan, this is for you. Pancakes with syrup? You haven't spoiled us with such sweets for a long time, Ain. Madara-sama, if you want, I'll cook. Hibi-chan, is it tasty? Orochimaru nodded, putting the origami aside. Come to me later, I'll give you something else tasty. How quickly you became a favorite, Madara chuckled, watching Ain leave. He looked at Hibi, who was quickly clearing the plate. Don't rush, no one will take it away. She'll cook you some more goodies, leave some room. Otherwise she'll get offended, she loves it when her cooking is eaten completely and people ask for more. But if anything happens, I'll help you, he grinned, returning to work. The child inside Orochimaru, who had not disappeared at all but had simply fallen asleep for a while, timidly scratched and said that he wanted these people who had taken care of him to survive. Orochimaru thought. The surviving Uchiha Izuna is an adequate Madara and, most likely, a peace concluded much earlier between Senju and Uchiha. Perhaps the best attitude of the Nidaime towards the Uchiha. This changed a lot in the future that Orochimaru knew. In short, there were advantages. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes in satisfaction, having found a compromise between the desires of his child and adult selves. A rough plan of action had already begun to form in his head. Test the limits of his current capabilities, provide all possible assistance to Izuna, and deal with the vague Uzumaki, know yourself. If he's right, and the whole point is that the technique required him to learn and accept something that he lost in childhood. If he can figure that out, he'll be able to grow up at an accelerated pace. That's already good. True, then you will have to explain a lot to your current guardians. Orochimaru rarely put off important matters for later, but in this case he had to rely on the principle of solving problems as they arose. First, I'll grow up a little. It's nice to be a child who is so well taken care of course, but I have too much to do to relax for long. Tobirama sent a letter 8 days later with a large raven. Oddly enough, the raven was not a summoning one. Intrigued, Izuna illuminated the bird with his Sharingan, but did not notice any hints of chakra. The raven croaked contemptuously at all his attempts to find out the truth, and flew away as soon as Izuna untied a small scroll from its leg, tickling his cheek with its wing. In the letter, Tobirama dryly apologized for the delay and suggested meeting in a secluded place. The coordinates were attached. He also noted that cautious hints about a possible truce had caused a positive reaction from his brother and several of his clanmates. The rest had a negative reaction. Izuna bit his lip doubtfully. Over the past 8 days, he had managed to thoroughly sit on Madara's ears with statistics on births and deaths, population growth, or rather, its absence, the reasons why the statistics were so sad. In a word, he had thoroughly overloaded his brain. Along the way, he hinted that the Senju were in the same situation, but as for other clans that had united and not butted heads like rams. No, Enai-chan, I'm not hinting at anything. By the way, don't you want to completely abolish the elders, Enai-chan? Otherwise, the clan doesn't do anything, but they just get on your nerves, and they'll also be very much against changes, but more on that later. Izuna wasn't worried about the woodpeckers in the clan. The word of the clan leader was the ultimate truth, it had to be. If the clan leader was wrong, in the opinion of ordinary people, it was necessary to turn to the elders or advisors. The elders had recently only grumbled about the stupid youth, and Izuna was the advisor. Accordingly, they would turn to him first, and he would be able to cool the ardor and convey the idea that it would be better to live together. Peace, friendship, Onigiri. How Tobirama will deal with his idiots is not his problem. The main thing is that Madara was thinking in the right direction. And even, it seems, he was trying to either compose a letter or prepare a speech. Hashirama, Izuna saw the drafts. Little Hibi was given a couple of days to adapt and sent to train. For now, only the basics of Tai and throwing weapons. What else can you teach an 8-year-old? The rest: writing, geography, the basics of making poisons and medicinal potions, the basics of survival in a shinobi environment, as Izuna called Naoko-sensei's boring lectures in childhood, he taught Hibi personally. Fortunately, there was time. The first surprises began. Hibi's Tai and kunai shuriken throwing were at an average level, but it was felt that he could do more, he just didn't want to, do it. In taijutsu it was exactly the same. Izuna himself saw how Hibi held back, not completing some very interesting techniques. And despite his young age, he already had a fighting style, he just lacked the physical capabilities. Strange? Well, it depends on the environment he grew up in. Izuna barely remembered himself at his age, but Takada-sensei, who once trained him and his brother, said that they fought just as well. The clan leader's child, how are they? But then the surprises got even more bizarre. The boy's calligraphy was no worse, if not better, than that of adults. Moreover, he wrote hieroglyphs without thinking, with a technique honed by many years of experience. He knew the kana system well, and he knew kanji well too. Izuna caught him a couple of times reading books that clearly had kanji that were not the ones they teach at his age. Hibi, by the way, read quickly, easily swallowing book after book. He listened attentively to geography, but it did not seem like he heard anything new. And during the poison-making lessons he openly had fun, with a carefully concealed condescending gleam in his eyes. It seemed that Hibi was diligently driving himself into the framework of an ordinary child, trying not to stand out. And for ordinary shinobi, his behavior would have looked natural. An ordinary kid with a Kekkei Genkai. Perhaps the future genius of the clan, who was raised very strictly, diligently hammering in a huge amount of knowledge. Or the heir to the clan head. Izuna knew firsthand how much skin was ripped off the children of the clan head. But there were little things, details that betrayed the mind of an adult. Hibi was a sweet little boy who clearly lacked family warmth, who loved to climb onto your lap or roll under your side, snoring comfortably. He loved sweets and catching snakes in the bushes. The first time he scared everyone, then they got used to the fact that snakes crawled to the child on their own and never bit. Hibi liked to sit with Izuna and Madara, he wasn't afraid of them at all. He listened to them with interest, sometimes quietly giggling at their simple everyday jokes. Hibi had the eyes of a grown shinobi who had seen too much of this life to successfully pretend to be an innocent child. Your foundling is not so simple, you know that? Madara casually remarked one evening while sipping sake on the engawa. The sun was already setting, most of the clan was sleeping quietly, with the exception of the guards and the restless clan leader. Izuna chuckled softly. Isn't it more interesting this way? And do you really think he can harm us? Izuna took his cup, sniffed it, but didn't drink it. He was planning to put the cub to sleep now and give the guards a prophylactic broom so that they wouldn't sleep and would be more vigilant. Doubtful. But I would like to know. We'll find out. He's only been here for a week. What kind of top-secret information could he possibly find out if he really is a spy? Like how the Uchiha clan teaches youngsters to throw a kunai at a target? Or the basics of calligraphy? It's not funny. We'll see, Nai-chan. Madara looked at him thoughtfully, raising an eyebrow ironically. You're not defending him because he slipped laxatives to all 5 elders, are you? Izuna pursed his lips to keep from laughing out loud. It was only possible to determine indirectly that it was Hibi who had tricked the old men. By the empty flasks hidden in the bushes, by the absence of some herbs in Natsume's pantry, and by his overly satisfied face. Oh, come on. Such a sweet child couldn't have committed such an unworthy act. They must have eaten something bad. The whole kahal, the whole congregation, that is. Madara snorted, looking back with interest towards the corridor where the children's feet were stomping briskly. Hibi, who had run out from around the corner, blinked in surprise, meeting 2 interested, cheerful glances. Blinking a couple more times, he ran up to Izuna, holding out a bundle that he was holding to his chest with both hands. Oh, you climbed into my closet? Be careful there are very unstable and heavy objects on the shelves, they can fall on your head. Give them here. I forgot about them. Your storage room? A hamster hole, more like. He collects everything that he can get his greedy hands on there, Madara explained to Hibi, who was staring at him demandingly. Anything that's not nailed down. From ancient scrolls and poetry to perfumes and kimonos. Now, explain to me, Otudo, why do you need women's kimonos, perfumes, and an oar? The last time I looked in there were Oni, Tengu, and Kitsune masks scattered across the floor. Who in the shinobi settlement are you trying to scare with them? They'll come in handy. Izuna blinked his eyelashes, just like Hibi. And every time he answers like that, the homegrown hamster, complained Madara Hibi, who was already quietly giggling. Right now, these fans? What do you need them for? Izuna smiled, pulling out 2 elegant silk fans from the thick fabric. White and pink hydrangea flowers bloomed on the thick golden silk, and colorful butterflies were hidden between the petals. The fans were supposed to be a gift. In the capital of the Wind Country, there lived a sweet girl, a civilian, a Maiko, a future geisha. She and Izuna spent many glorious hours discussing poetry, music, all sorts of little things that were pleasant to the heart. She taught Izuna to smile mysteriously and softly, hiding her true intentions. Izuna taught her to hide senbons in her hair and to hit weak points for self-defense. She died last spring from illness. The fans remained in the closet, a reminder of carefree laughter and warm brown eyes. Izuna rose easily, descended from the engawa, and opened his fan with a quiet click, holding a golden wing in each hand. He didn't love her as a woman, she was a friend, a true, loyal, his only best friend. Everyone betrayed him, but she always held out her hand. Reminded him that there was a life where you don't have to kill. A light turn on one leg, flapping your arms like wings. There are smiles and laughter. Close your eyes, let the melody in your soul guide you through this dance. Smile at the breathless audience. There is joy, fun, friendship, and love. Bend over and gracefully twist your palm, causing the butterflies to flap their wings in fear. There are bonds that are stronger than steel. There are times when you don't need to fear a treacherous kunai in your back. To whirl around like a whirlwind with golden sparks, laughing and crying in my soul. Somewhere there is a peaceful life where you don't have to teach your children to fight from the age of 5. Somewhere there is a life where you know you'll live until tomorrow evening. Izuna bowed to Madara and Hibi, who seemed to have trouble remembering how to breathe. He wanted with all his heart to create such a life. It is possible even for natural-born killers and monsters, isn't it? Orochimaru looked at the ceiling, covered with a blanket up to his neck. The blanket was carefully tucked in and he was kissed on the top of his head as usual. Uchiha Izuna moved easily, smiling as usual mischievously and without sadness in his eyes. But his dance said much more. Hope. To another life, without deaths and sufferings. To happiness, trust, sincerity. Orochimaru managed to grasp this shaky ghost of hope with his fingertips, and now he didn't know what to do with it. So little depends on him. But he is not a child. Let him understand that his growing up is a matter of weeks. Sometimes an hour is enough for everything to collapse. And yet, even though he can do so little now, he will not stand aside. This hope was not shown to him in vain. He will not lose it, will not forget it, will not throw it aside as unnecessary trash. Orochimaru smiled, closing his eyes in reassurance. Everything will be fine, Uchiha Izuna. Everything will definitely be fine. Commentary on Temari. Temari is a ball, in short. A black ball is tied with threads to create a pattern. Now it is a special kind of Japanese handicraft, but earlier Temari were both toys and amulets. I thought that not everyone here is a Japanologist. Shoji are the window and door sashes in Japanese houses. Well, essentially, they are windows and doors. Engawa is a veranda around the house. Kamen is a coat of arms sewn onto clothing. I read up on it and it turns out that it can be any coat of arms, on anything. I have a complicated relationship with the letter yo, yes. Izuna approached the house where Tobirama invited him according to all the rules of shinobiak science. Stealthily, carefully dissolving among the shadows, silently, masking the radiation of chakra and periodically shining through the surroundings with the Sharingan. And at the border of the forest and the clearing where the house was located, he froze completely, a black ball on a tree branch. He saw Tobirama right away. The albino, brazenly ignoring all precautions, was sleeping under the shade of a spreading oak. Izuna snorted cheerfully, several great ideas for how to prank Tobirama had already popped into his head. It seemed he had been talking to Hibi. He, although a precocious and intelligent child, did not neglect pranks appropriate for his age. And his intelligence and talentedly constructed cute face helped him avoid problems. Alas, Izuna failed to draw on Tobarama's face or do something else harmless. Senju was not entirely careless after all and carefully covered his sleeping body with traps. Skillfully, the Sharingan barely made out the thin web. Izuna remembered the general scheme. It looks good, will come in handy. Ideally, you need to jump from the tree, deliberately with noise. Wake up Tobarama, and being far away from him, the reflexes of a shinobi awakened in a conditionally dangerous situation are severe. And it is simply impolite to sneak up on a sleeping ally. The pedantic Senju, who was arranging the kunai by size and holding the kibakufudas in a neat stack, had disheveled hair and rumpled clothes. Never in Izuna's memory had he looked so tired, with bags under his eyes and a general feeling of loss of strength. Well, it looks like his kind, sweet clanmates were driving him. And I still wanted to spar with him. I guess I'll get by. Although why am I gloating, as if I don't have the same kind of woodpeckers? I'm only saved by the affection from Hibi-chan. Otherwise I would have already killed some, especially smart ones. Izuna snorted again and smoothly descended from the tree. Slowly, merging with the natural background of chakra, he approached the border of the traps. Sitting down right on the ground, Izuna unsealed a small scroll and a travel inkwell with a brush. It's not that he was an artist. To be honest, only Madara liked his drawings. The others thought it was a waste of ink and time. The kids, the younger ones, happily dragged their brushes across the paper. Until the first enemy was killed. But Hibi, to whom Izuna had given his own portrait in the first couple of days, intuitively sketched with snakes, was truly hooked. He looked at the picture, at Izuna, in surprise. He was embarrassed to the point of red ears and ran off to his room. Later, Izuna saw this portrait carefully pinned to the wall in his room. Hibi himself drew well, but it didn't interest him. Reading, mixing some poisons, rummaging through the bushes in search of snakes, that was more interesting to him. Hibi also liked to watch Izuna draw. From the side it looked a little creepy, because the child blinked rarely and quickly. The snake's pupil narrowed into a thin line, and the usually unemotional face became unusually thoughtful. The sleeping Senju Tobarama could be shared and then drawn from memory in a calm environment. With a charcoal sketch, with colored ink. But Izuna wasn't interested in that. But drawing from life, in an unsafe environment, on your knee. Izuna, sticking out the tip of his tongue from diligence, was diligently drawing the disheveled hair with the tip of his brush when he heard a voice hoarse from sleep. What are you doing? Fortunately, the shinobi's firm hand did not waver, and he managed not to leave a blot. Izuna took his hand away from the scroll and raised his honest eyes to Tobarama, who was already gloomy and tense from sleep. I'm drawing you. And he lowered his head to the scroll again. Ah, it was a pity that the relaxedness that shone through Tobarama's features was gone without a trace. Izuna rarely saw him like this. Often, when the Uchiha and most of the Senju were not around. It's good that he drew the face first. The drawing was turning out beautiful. Izuna decided that he would not color it. Maybe he would add some shadows later with gray and blue paint. Tobarama, puzzled, fell silent, meanwhile quickly rolled up the traps around himself and deployed them again, but this time around the clearing. Izuna briefly noted that the scheme was even more intricate and that he absolutely had to remember it. Senju nobly did not look over his shoulder, but he kept casting a piercing glance at him. Can I see it? Tobarama asked in a surprisingly polite tone as Izuna began to put away his brush and inkwell. After some hesitation, Izuna handed him the drawing. I hope he doesn't get angry and rip it up. I'd like to show it to Hibi-chan, he'd like it. If there were any negative emotions towards Tobarama left, they would disappear after such a drawing. Did you use the Sharingan when you painted? Senju asked with a strange expression on his face, looking closely at the portrait. It's hard to say, Izuna chuckled, puzzled. To some extent, yes. To some extent? Tobarama turned his gaze to him. Even without activating the Sharingan, I can see more than a normal person, Izuna explained, getting up from the grass. He shook himself. I can see every hair on your collar, every chip on your helmet. Every crease in your clothes, dust particles, stray hairs. Of course, I didn't go into such detail in the drawing, but... Why did you ask? Oh, just like that, Tobarama buried his face in the scroll again. Can I make a copy? For what? It's beautiful, Tobarama said unexpectedly. I want to show it to my brother. Izuna froze in surprise, blinking rapidly. He thought, looking at Tobarama, who was more serious than usual. He resisted the urge to make a kai sound. Is that possible? Tobarama repeated patiently. Why are you asking permission? Izuna shrugged awkwardly. You were drawn. You have the right. But you were drawing, Tobarama answered in the same tone, making the necessary seals dash. Why are you so surprised? An unusual reaction. I expected you to be, not so calm, Izuna chuckled. He shrugged. How can I tell you? In the clan, the ability to draw is not considered something great. Especially for an adult shinobi. More often they say that it is a waste of time, and not something like, wow, how beautiful, draw more. Something like that. Tobarama frowned, but said nothing. He silently handed back the drawing and waved his hand invitingly toward the house. There was practically no furniture in the house, just a couple of shelves and a low table. Having unsealed a couple of pillows from the scrolls, he threw them on either side of the table. Then came a teapot, bowls, a basket with something deliciously smelling, and a plump folder. Take a look while I make some tea. Do I have any reason to scream paranoidly that you want to poison me? Izuna asked phlegmatically, leafing through the papers. No, Tobarama snorted. I would have come up with something more interesting. And weren't you the one talking about trust? Trust but verify, Senju, Uchiha sighed. Sorry if anything. The elder screwed me up. Judging by your confused face, you have the same problem? Tobarama remained silent again. But he remained silent, the blonde bastard, so meaningfully. Izuna snorted and became engrossed in reading the folder. What can I say? As much as Izuna considered himself thoughtful, he was far from the pedantic Tobarama. Analysis of the current situation, both theirs and the Uchiha's, forecasts, possible paths to unification, several options for living together. There were even sketches of a common village. Budget planning, management. Izuna had questions about the latter. You're a bit contradictory here, he told Senju, who had just set tea in front of him. A little higher up you write that all this magnificence should be managed by a person who will be respected by both clans. Independent, objective, disinterested, all that stuff. And then you start describing how Hashirama would cope with all this well, the advantages. Tobarama, your brother as the head of the clan, is one of the most interested people. And if he becomes the head of the future village, there will be many outraged by this among the Uchiha. And among the Senju there will be plenty of those who will turn up their noses and expect some kind of privileges. Where do you propose to find such a disinterested person? Tobarama asked sullenly, sitting down opposite him. You can't deny that Hashirama would make an excellent leader. Yes, I don't argue. As, incidentally, did Madara, Izuna answered calmly, putting the folder on the table. His temples were tingling slightly, he had memorized all the calculations with the help of the Sharingan, and his head was spinning a little from the influx of a huge amount of information. Tobarama straightened up. His hand didn't shake as he picked up the teacup from the table and took a sip. But his gaze was scorching and displeased. Before he could say anything unflattering, Izuna sighed and continued. But neither Madara Nai-san nor Hashirama can be the head of the future village. They lead and will lead their own clans. And someone needs to be put over them. Well, let the person be either Senju or Uchiha, but someone who commands respect from both clans, not the heir of either clan, someone who understands business and management, but does not try to grab more power for himself. That sounds reasonable, Tobarama nodded with concentration. But it turns out that you and I are no good either. We are the heirs of our brothers. Well, who knows, Izuna shrugged. If they do end up having kids. Although, considering their attraction to each other. What are you hinting at? Senju straightened up. His gaze was like ruby needles. Izuna smiled at him lightly. Please don't tell me that you didn't notice the sparks between them. If it weren't for the battles, clans, and the like, they would have long ago moved their relationship to the horizontal plane. The bowl creaked pitifully and crumbled into pieces between Tobarama's fingers. The albino blazed with icy fury. You noticed, Izuna guessed, tenaciously tracking his reactions. You've noticed this for a long time. Maybe you've already discussed it with him? I don't know Hashirama, but, most likely, your Oni-chan assured you with a gentle smile that these feelings pose no threat to the clan. Tobirama closed his eyes, reining in his feelings. Izuna continued speaking, quietly but earnestly. You're angry not only because your brother has fallen for the enemy. Not because Madara has been a special person to him since childhood. But because these feelings have no future. They are destined to kill each other, they are destined to die at each other's hands. They are doomed to fight and lead their clans alone. They cannot be together. Izuna smiled with the corner of his lips. His voice dropped to a whisper. You're angry because you can't make your brother happy. It burned so brightly after the battles with Madara, Tobirama said unexpectedly bitterly, opening his eyes. He looked gloomily at the shards of the bowl, carelessly sweeping them onto the floor. We'll figure out how to unite the clans. We'll build a village. You're right, they can't be the heads. We'll solve this issue. I think we should choose several worthy candidates from each clan, strong, morally stable, reasonable people. Hold something like elections, voting. I think that would be the best option. And then our little brothers will at least breathe easier, Izuna nodded understandingly. He nodded at the folder. Where do we start? We need to somehow carefully push the clans towards the idea of a truce. And work on the little brothers separately. I've already shaken Madara up pretty badly, he already understands that we're in deep shit and we need to do something about it. And how are you? Hashirama is upset by the statistics, Senju winced. I think if the data were openly shown to the clan, everyone would be impressed. You know, outside interference wouldn't hurt. Interference? The third clan that we'll be beating up together, united? Izuna rubbed his nose, mentally running through the list of suitable clans. Maybe Kagaya. Because we can beat up the rest of them individually. Lure someone ourselves? No, Tobirama refuted himself. That's already betrayal. I propose this plan. Izuna listened to him and suppressed a satisfied smile. How pleasant it was to communicate with an intelligent interlocutor who understood him with half a word. With half a glance even. As in battles, when it was possible to read the mood and nature of the enemy by the slightest movement. It would be interesting to fight side by side with Tobirama. Not against him. Tobirama, who had jumped over the fence of the clan quarter, winced in annoyance. As always, the guards were blatantly careless. If he could get to the clan head's house quietly and not a single dog would scratch, he would follow the example of Madara, who barked at his Uchiha so that they instantly turned into mischievous puppies instead of formidable shinobi. I've lived to see it, Tobirama thought gloomily, gliding with a quiet, light step toward the house. I'm already planning to follow Uchiha Madara's example. The previous days have shown that this is exactly the kind of behavior that affects some individuals. Until you bark and kick them in the right direction, they won't itch. Damn Uchiha Izuna. Lately, Tobirama had been completely unfairly blaming him for every trouble and every headache. Yes, the idea of a truce was interesting and important. Yes, the statistics that Izuna himself had first dug up and then Tobirama had double-checked were correct and raised quite reasonable concerns. Yes, the damned Uchiha could not be suspected of anything, absolutely nothing. Izuna didn't act like an enemy towards him. During the first negotiations, he joked, but spoke seriously and openly. He allowed him to hear something intimate, important to him, by chance. To make him feel warm feelings towards him? And at the second meeting he did something completely different. Tobirama didn't consider himself handsome. Or worthy of an artist's brush either. Yes, an albino, how unusual. Yes, not ugly. So what next? And then, the peaceful face of Uchiha, who drew him with rapture, one might even say, inspiredly. Diligently, devoting all his attention to the brush and paper. But Tobirama did not guarantee his safety, not at all. And he could have tried to attack. Izuna drew him sleeping peacefully under the shade of a tree, with a soft and defenseless expression on his face that only Hashirama had ever seen. He drew beautifully, you can't take away the bastard's talent. Even if he learned with the help of the Sharingan, no dojutsu will give him the ability to catch a moment and capture it on paper. What should he do with it now? Tobarama printed out the portrait from the fuin, froze, hesitantly looking around his room. Hang it somewhere? Just put it down? Give it to Hashirama, who would definitely be pleased with such a drawing. Ototo? Are you back already? Speak of the devil, Tobarama restrained the instinctive desire to throw or hide the piece of paper somewhere. He turned to his brother and nodded briefly. Hashirama was wearing a home yukata, tired, sleepy, smiling kindly. With shadows under his eyes, shadows at the bottom of his pupils, tired after the day. Tobarama did not want to burden him even more today, but if his brother asked him to tell in detail where he had been and what he had done, he would not lie. What's that? Can I see it? Hashirama noticed the drawing and raised an eyebrow questioningly. Tobarama silently handed him the paper, suddenly feeling the tips of his ears grow warm. He could predict his brother's reaction, very well even. You look so peaceful and calm here, Hashirama expectedly said, touched, stroking the drawing with his fingertips. Whoever drew you, they were a great artist. They captured your relaxation and natural beauty so well. Is this the one you met today? Hashirama suddenly narrowed his eyes slyly. Yes, Tobarama didn't lie. He tried to make his face more inaccessible, so as not to arouse Ani-chan's curiosity. However, this is his curious Ani-chan. Who is it? A girl? A guy? Have you finally decided to find yourself a partner, Toryu? Tobarama almost choked on air. Why did you decide that I had a date? You were nervous before you left, Toryu, Hashirama smiled. You were sorting through your gear, you weren't at all concerned with your appearance, you weren't paying attention when reviewing the reports. Sorry, I'll review things. Toryu, Hashi interrupted. He came closer, covered his shoulder with his palm, and squeezed lightly. You let this man see you so defenseless and relaxed. You want to trust this man. He looked into the stubborn scarlet eyes and sighed with a soft smile. It's probably a subconscious desire. And yet, Tora, you will soon realize your feelings, I'm sure. I won't embarrass you or ask you in detail for now. Hashirama pressed his forehead to his and continued quietly. Just promise that you will be happy. Tobarama's throat suddenly tightened. The unspoken words scratched at his heart, be happy. Because I can't. At that moment, he must have finally decided to implement the idea of peace and unification of the clans. And be sure to introduce me to this artist, Hashirama asked cheerfully, handing him back the drawing and hurriedly leaving the room. Tobarama gritted his teeth. If we can make all our ideas come true. When everything settles down, I swear, Ani-chan, I'll throw the craziest tea party imaginable. You, me, Izuna, and Madara. We'll drink tea and get to know each other in a proper manner. I'll definitely convince Izuna to draw you. And I'll make you confess to Madara. In front of the elders. Tobarama savored the wild thoughts brought on by fatigue. What a wonderful revenge for the days and nights of stress. Orochimaru immediately noticed that Izuna had begun to implement his plans. After a short disappearance, presumably, the Uchiha ran away to meet with Tobarama. He quietly but very purposefully began to harass not only his brother, but also the strongest and most respected shinobi in the clan. The topic of the brainwashing was the deplorable demographic situation of the Uchiha and the example of other clans that united instead of killing each other. A safe future for the children, expansion of territory, the opportunity to beat the crap out of other clans more successfully, the opportunity to focus not only on becoming strong enough to survive, but also to begin exploring the world around them. Orochimaru was ready to sincerely admire Izuna. For each of them, he chose words that touched the most delicate strings of the soul. Izuna skillfully played on people's feelings, forcing them to change their opinions to one that was more beneficial to him. Izuna relentlessly forced people to believe in the idea of unification. For now, just with another clan. But a worthy clan, not weak. The funniest thing is that after a week or two of mind fermentation, the idea of cooperation with Senju was put forward not by Izuna, and not even by Madara, who was condescendingly watching the work of the Otuto, but by a completely ordinary Uchiha. Having reached the third tomo, a respected kendo master, about the same age as Madara, Uchiha Takashi suggested uniting with Senju. Rather timidly, he suggested that there were no other clans in the area that were so strong, worthy of fighting side by side with the Uchiha, but Senju. Worthy, yes. This caused a storm of conflicting emotions. Denial, indignation, what kind of blasphemy is this? We actually have a blood feud here. Indignation. And so far, weak, like primroses in spring, glimmers of agreement with this idea. Aizu-chan, if you keep nagging everyone a little longer, I'll have a delegation of Uchiha coming to me, eager to establish contact with the Senju. Madara lazily stretched out his legs on the Engawa. Izuna giggled in agreement, openly squeezing Orochimaru. He didn't resist. Orochimaru allowed himself to be pulled onto his knees, exposed himself to stroking on the head. Yes, he frankly enjoyed it. Just like the constant treats from Ain, the toys, the time spent in the company of the two Uchiha. Orochimaru indulged his inner child mercilessly, trying not to get caught with his not-so-childish skills. And he diligently drove away thoughts about how he would explain his sudden growth to Madara and Izuna. Figuring out what the Uzumaki meant by know yourself was easy. It was so offensively simple, Orochimaru even felt like an idiot again. An interesting feeling, if you think about it, very sobering. The point is that each person has certain developmental milestones that need to be passed in order to become a harmonious, integral nature. But life is an unpredictable thing, and man is an illogical creature. Therefore, it happens that a person misses some milestones on his path, consciously or unintentionally. The technique of the cunning Uzumaki allowed to determine this missed part of development and make up for it. Let's be honest. Uzumaki simply drove a person into a period of time that he lived incorrectly, and forced him to live it again. Taking into account the mistakes of the past, so to speak. And until you understand what is missing and fix it, you will not grow up again. How funny that it turned out he lacked a normal childhood. Exactly like this, with toys and treats, with adults who teach him normally, take care of him, cuddle him, stroke his head and kiss his forehead before going to bed. Orochimaru did not listen to what Madara and Izuna were slowly discussing. He enjoyed the strange and unusual feeling. He was next to people who were truly perceived as guardians, like family. He was accepted by them, they were together. Hibi is falling asleep. Izuna, take him to bed. And go to bed yourself. You're giving orders, Oniai-chan, Izuna muttered, yawning furtively. He stood up, easily picking up Hibi in his arms. The child perked up, blinking rapidly. Now we'll go to bed, Izuna yawned again, slapping his bare feet on the floor. And tomorrow we'll walk around the area, okay? I'll show you my summoning cats, do you want to? Hibi nodded, smiling slightly. I want to give a cute little kitten to one person, Izuna confided, smiling slyly. But a mischievous one, so he won't get bored. Will you help me pick one out? The child blinked thoughtfully. Tomorrow will be fun, Izuna promised, putting the baby to bed. Orochimaru believed him. The younger Uchiha was very active and cheerful, prone to teasing others, and Orochimaru was ready to bet his snake tail that as a child Izuna had turned half of the village upside down, if not the entire village. Sometimes he wanted to chat with him. Just talk about this and that. Answer his questions with more than just a nod or a blink. He wanted to tell him stories from his childhood. About his team, for example. About how Tsunade would slap Jiraiya on the back of the head and turn up her nose, but would mercilessly beat anyone who said nasty things about her teammates. About how much fun it was to help Jiraiya with his pranks. About how Orochimaru sometimes got him off easy because he was nice and adults believed him, and Jiraiya was sulking at him for it. But he still gave him his first book personally, puffed up with pride, with a happy smile and a bag of caramels that Orochi sometimes gnawed on. But his speech would give him away. His manner of speaking, his vocabulary, his timbre of voice, the emotional tone of his speech. Orochimaru was aware that he was a mediocre actor. Being in a child's body and speaking like a child were two completely different things. Orochimaru would not be able to speak like a small, carefree child, with an adjustment for the reality of a shinobi. They suspected him anyway. He was sure of it. The Uchiha were unrestrained and temperamental. Madara was a raging flame, covered in ash for the time being, a firestorm. Izuna was a wandering swamp light, winking cheerfully from the bushes, dangerous, treacherous. But if there was one thing they weren't, it was idiots. And they certainly didn't trust him completely. They did, up to a certain point. Orochimaru understood that. But deep down inside, where a small child still lived, he wanted to be accepted by these people. Completely. And he wanted to open himself up to them to the limit. When the slyly smiling Izuna led him by the hand away from the Uchiha village, Orochimaru for some reason thought that he would be taken to some small house in the forest thicket or some other secluded place, located nearby, even if hidden by some seals. But he never expected that he would be easily thrown over his back with a cheerful chuckle, then they would form a summoning seal, simultaneously walking, 3 steps to the left, 2 to the right, a sharp turn on the heels. Before the eyes of the astonished Orochimaru, the terrain changed beyond recognition. The first thing he became aware of was the rhythmic jingle of the bells on the cats' collars. Then he inhaled the scent of herbs and milk. Then, with his mouth slightly open, he looked around at the small houses illuminated by colorful lanterns, the upright cats in yukatas scurrying back and forth, the stall selling sweets and fish on sticks, the pagoda towering over the cat village, decorated with garlands of lights, the persimmon trees blooming near each house. Impressive, isn't it? Izuna chuckled cheerfully at the child's surprised face. Welcome to the hidden village of Naniko, Hibi-chan. Naniko. Orochimaru leaned against Izuna's back as he slowly walked towards the pagoda. In his time, Naniko lived only in Soraku, a town of black market traders. There was also Nakomida's castle. But a hidden village. Orochimaru greedily examined the inhabitants, ordinary small cats, Bakaniko, and Nakomida with forked tails, predatorily licking Kaibu, Kashi, bursting into flames. At the edge of his consciousness, he scratched that in his time, this charming place no longer existed. The thought was sad. Orochimaru immediately pushed it away. How could one be sad in such a magical place? Where the night sky was full of stars, even though he and Izuna had left the house in the morning. Where the ringing of bells and multicolored lanterns hovered right in the air. Where it smelled of wild herbs and the petals of persimmons, blooming out of season, quietly fell on the paths. Somewhere an arrow began to play softly, and a bamboo flute immediately responded. A large cat nearby laughed hissingly. Slender cats at the ribbon counter purred in admiration. It's a magical place, isn't it? Izuna asked quietly. The cats nodded politely, watching him with unobtrusive glances. Madara and I ended up here by accident. We made the Kuchio seals, tripped, and fell right in the middle of the main square. We were really snotty kids back then. It's a good thing Naniko are usually curious, otherwise this adventure could have ended badly. He didn't want to think about anything bad in this place, but Orochimaru couldn't help but notice how sharp the fangs and claws of the cats here were. Which, however, didn't detract from their cuteness. We're heading to the castle now, Izuna nodded towards the pagoda. First of all, we're buying equipment from the Naniko, we need to clarify the quantity, cost. Well, you're not interested in adult matters, are you? He chuckled. Secondly, you've probably noticed that we're going through a difficult time right now? I want to stop the feud between 2 clans that's lasted for a century, Izuna said simply, pretending not to notice the fingers clenching tighter on his clothes. It's very difficult. Hard times await us. I want to discuss that too. Izuna came close to the pagoda. He put Hibi down on the ground, grabbed his hand tightly. He smiled playfully, brightly. Thirdly, we'll pick out a cat for my friend. Will you help me? The castle was quiet. It smelled of lavender and thyme. They were met by a white cat in a silk yukata embroidered with gold threads. With a bow, she escorted them to a luxuriously decorated hall with an abundance of cushions on the floor, and left, quietly jingling the bells on the decorations. Izuna bowed to Nakomida, who was lounging on the pillows. The huge cat was impressive, with his size, scars, and palpable power. So Hibi bowed too. It wouldn't hurt him, and if Izuna got into trouble because of his petty stubbornness, he would definitely have something like remorse. And in general, he is a polite, sweet child. That's it. The polite, sweet child was sent to play with the little kittens in the far corner of the room, separated by a screen. And the screen was not simple, because Orochimaru did not hear the conversation between Izuna and Nakomida, and yet in the same room were. Whose mistrust is this? Izuna's or Nakomida's? However, when 5 adorable kittens are trampling all over you, there is no time for reflection. Your child is a good 3 decades older than you, Nakomida said lazily, stretching out on his pillows. After admiring his claws, he continued. If you want him to disappear quietly, I can arrange it. If you want him to tell the whole truth, even against his will, I can arrange it too. Thank you, but I don't need either, Uchiha smiled. I like him too much to kill him. And I believe that Hebe-chan himself will tell me everything when the time comes. You're too trusting, the cat sighed, sitting up straighter. So why did you actually come? All the deliveries have long been agreed upon. Yes, I know. And we will help you in any case. And we will also participate in your attempts to stop the stupid human feud. Izuna smiled. Who would doubt that the head of this village has ears everywhere? You yourself know all this. So why did you come and bring this non-child? Izuna closed his eyes, the smile leaving his face. Nakomida. Can you let some of your Bakaniko keep an eye on the Uchiha and Senju? Secretly, of course. I'm worried. I can. Are you worried that the truce idea will fail? No. I'm afraid of civil strife. He looked straight into the narrow cat pupils. How strange, Hebe has almost the same eyes, but still, you can't call him a cat. A snake, nimble, cute, flexible, a snakelet in their crow's nest. Now both clans are full of dissatisfied people. The last thing we need is for us to kill each other. How stressful, Nakomida said, stretching. Well, I'll send someone more agile. Feed my baby some fish, okay? When you have time. Agreed, Izuna smiled broadly, straightening his shoulders. Of course, it wasn't very good that he would hide this from his brother. He would apologize later, repent, tell everything. All his intrigues and plans. All his doubts and bad thoughts. But for now. The less Madara knew about what Izuna was doing, the deeper his sleep. Hebe came out from behind the screen. Izuna noticed in passing that the child was stomping loudly, announcing that he was going to approach them. He was warning them. After all, he could walk silently, smoothly, like a snake. He was smart, too smart for an ordinary child. Where are we, and where is the ordinary? Izuna smiled affectionately and patted the little kitten in his arms behind the ear. Hebe lifted the kitten up in his arms. The kitten yawned right in Izuna's face, turning its muzzle away boredly. How cute, Izuna said, taking the kitten and scratching it behind the ear. Just the one this boar needs. I'll have to drag him here sometime, once everything gets better. Tobirama, Orochimaru suddenly realized as he watched Izuna coo over the kitten. He wanted to give this cat to Tobirama. Senju Tobirama, the Nidaime, is a cat lover. Orochimaru had a developed imagination. He easily imagined Tobirama in the middle of the Naniko village. His imagination drew such a blissful expression on his face that Orochimaru only miraculously kept from grinning widely. Oh, how he wished he could see it. Hebe-chan, you're not a child, right? Izuna asked quietly, casting a sly glance at Orochimaru. He froze, his eyes widening. Damn child's body. Most likely it gives away all reactions. At this age it is so difficult for him to control himself. I realized long ago that you are not an ordinary child. Your eyes are too adult, Uchiha straightened up, looking at the frozen Orochimaru with a slight smile. Your gaze. It is like that of a shinobi who has been through 100 or 2 battles, who has lost everyone who was dear to him. Orochimaru blinked, involuntarily clenching his fists. Lost, could it be considered a loss that his relationship with Ji and Tsunade snapped like a taut rope? Could it be considered that they had no more room for him in their hearts? Is this a loss? But it wasn't he who lost it. It was his loyal teammates and comrades who lost it. I would like to ask you about many things. Who you are and where you are from. Whether it was by chance that you ended up with Tobirama and me. Why you stay in our settlement and try to be an ordinary child. And I think, Izuna covered the scarlet gleam of the Sharingan with his eyelashes, I will be able to get you to talk. However, he opened his eyes completely onyx black, deep, warm. I will not do that. I will not ask anything, and I will not even hand you over to Madara. Orochimaru blinked a couple of times. He squinted, tilting his head to the side. He wanted to ask, he wanted to give himself away completely. But he was already giving himself away in earnest. Children don't squint or stare like that. I want to believe you, Hebe, Izuna smiled. He extended his hand, gently touching the top of his head. I want to believe that you like it here. That you like being a normal child. I don't believe that you're a spy would hardly be so selflessly playing with a ball and creating petty mischief. Cammy, you have that look in your eyes when Madara or I hug you. Izuna didn't finish the sentence, shaking his head. Orochimaru didn't need to continue. He knew what he looked like when he was hugged. I'll believe that look. I'll believe you, Hebe. We need to call the snakes and get out of here, hissed Paranoia. Wow, he's so naive and trusting. Take advantage of it, something dark inside mocked. He is so kind to us. I want to hug him. I want to help him. Can we be frank with these people? The inner child whispered barely audibly. A child? Or something real, something Orochimaru buried in the first war. Thoughts were still flashing in his head like multicolored fireflies, and his body was acting. Orochimaru could summon snakes that would kill Izuna instantly. He could use 24 techniques that would subdue or cripple the Uchiha. He could have escaped by calling back. Instead, he leaned forward, hugging Izuna tightly, climbing into his lap. The slightly strangled kitten meowed in displeasure, running off to the nearby pillow. The Uchiha picked up Hebe in his arms, making him more comfortable on himself and leaning back against the pillows. When Nakomata had managed to disappear, incredibly tactfully giving them the opportunity to talk in private, he couldn't say. Hebe snored quietly and unevenly, clinging to his clothes. I'll be by your side, Izuna whispered, stroking his long, smooth hair. Whoever you are. Why? Orochimaru asked, his voice hoarse from the long silence. I don't know, Izuna shrugged lightly. My intuition tells me that Madara and I need you. A lot. Orochimaru hesitated whether to speak. He closed his eyes tightly and said, I'll start growing up soon. This technique, its effect will soon wear off. We'll figure it out. Izuna pulled back a little, smiling softly. He pinched her cheek, exclaiming cheerfully, but I'm really glad you finally spoke to me, Hebe-chan. Or, not Hebe-chan? What's your name? Orochimaru. He finally gave in and decided not to remain silent. What's the point now? And besides, if he wants to be trusted, maybe he should take a step forward? Orochimaru, the Uchiha said thoughtfully. I'll call you Orochi. Or Oro-chan. Orochimaru frowned involuntarily. I'm much older than you, Aizu-chan. At least twice as old. Yeah, and you can't resist hugs and sweets, Izuna drawled mockingly, starting to openly squeeze him. Keep in mind, Ayin told me that you're ticklish. I'll tell Tobirama that you can dance with fans and like to wear women's kimonos at home. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes slyly. Izuna entertained himself with the latter at night and only at home. You're a nasty little snake. Uchiha was indignantly dramatic. Hugging the kid tightly, he suddenly said seriously, Orochimaru, can I ask you? Please, stay the same as you are now. No, I mean, when you grow up, stay as sincere. Mischievous, sly, bright. Yes, I understand, you are a shinobi and you have killed. But there is still light in you, keep it. Please. Orochimaru caught his breath. Once upon a time, during a drinking party with Jiraiya and Tsunade, when the former passed out, Tsunade asked him with sudden bitterness. Orochimaru, bring back your light. You were so bright when you were a child. Wherever all the things that made G and I love you went. Please bring them back. Your smile, your light. Then Haim passed out, and in the morning, of course, she remembered nothing. But Orochimaru could not forget these words. Instead of answering, he pressed himself closer to Izuna. I will keep it. What came back to me in such a strange way, in your home, in your arms? I will keep it for you, Uchiha Izuna. Commentary on Shadow Bakuniko. I mean shadow cloning of things, it was in canon, I think. I hope it was. Bakuniko, Nakomata, Kaibyo, Kashi, Japanese yokai cats. Different types. https://uanime.tv/upload/screenshots/no.game.no.life/pic.2.jpg/0000001.jpg. This is how I imagined a cat village. Well, approximately. Well, in such colors. Anime, no game, no life. You already understood that I don't guarantee a sale, right? I love everyone who reads and comments on this work. Right to the moon and back. From the next chapter, Orochi starts to grow up. Little by little. The reality of having two jobs is killing me. The rustle of a kimono and a cat's purr . Madara waited patiently, watching his younger brother's intrigues with amusement. The realization was bitter on his tongue. Izuna could do what he couldn't. And even Hashirama couldn't. The little brothers have outdone us, haven't they, Hashi? More and more people in the clan are thinking about an alliance, and that the only worthy clan that could join them is the Senju. Blood feud? Dear sirs, isn't it more important to provide your children with a happy and long life? That's true. But isn't it wonderful? A quiet laugh. The wind playfully throws a strand of someone else's hair into his face. Madara intercepts the strand, chuckling. Giving in to the playful mood, he quickly touches the soft hair with his lips, not taking his eyes off Hashirama. The head of the Senju clan sighs, leaning forward involuntarily. Who would have known that Madara has just as much tenderness and seduction as he does fire and fury in battle? Tobirama has almost finished processing ours. Most of the Senju are impressed by the statistics and are also thinking about unification. True, a guilty smile, the Uchiha are almost out of the question for now. It's okay, I believe in your brother, Madara chuckled, pulling Hashirama to himself by the waist. In the worst case, we'll set my Aizu-chan and Hibi-chan on them. No one will raise a hand against them, and Izuna will be able to fool their brains well. Hibi? The kid Izuna brought in? Hashirama arched his back accommodatingly. You still haven't figured out where he's from? Nope. He's not dangerous and definitely not a child. He has too much of an adult look and too much sober calculation in his actions. Are you sure everything will be okay? Madara pressed his lips to the tanned skin. Yes, Izuna is keeping an eye on him. No, Hashirama sighed, catching his fleeting thoughts. I'm talking about this unification. Madara slowed down for a second, fighting with the other's belt. Did Hashirama have to remember business, problems, when they were together? They rarely managed to meet outside the battlefield, and that made the kisses sweeter. And the partings more bitter. And the chakra burned even more in battle. After all, they were enemies. I will believe that our younger brothers will be able to realize our dream. They have more faith and determination than us, Kashi. They will not retreat. Tobirama glided silently through the tree branches, like a forest ghost. He was without his favorite cloak, and even without a helmet, he was in too much of a hurry. Senju's face was an emotionless mask, but inside. In his heart, Tobirama cursed his clan, the stupidity of people, this whole life, and the Uchiha. Everyone in general and each one individually. Although it was absolutely undeserved, since the reason for his leaving home in the middle of the night without proper equipment was his clanmates. And not the red-eyed ones at all. It wasn't fair. Tobirama wanted to blame the Uchiha for everything, the same as Izuna. He wanted to grumble, as usual, about how no peace was possible with them. He wanted to silently support his clan. Instead, he raced to the Uchiha to warn them of a sabotage, a secret Senju attack on the settlement. Later, Tobirama would try to console himself with the thought, Ani-chan would be upset by this, the Senju don't attack so vilely. But these excuses. Izuna would laugh at him. Or he'll look at you understandingly, nod to his thoughts and suggest discussing the proposed united settlement. Or he'll start complaining about his brother. Or he'll start drawing. Tobirama's flawless mask twisted in indignation. He had been thinking about one Uchiha an inordinate amount in recent weeks. And not just in the context of their spontaneous collaboration. They had been fighting each other since childhood. Each time they learned each other's peculiarities better. For example, In the mornings Izuna was angrier than usual and almost never joked. He didn't like early awakenings. He tries to lead the battle away from his clanmates, he cares, and also doesn't like crowds. He likes to show off, to brag about new techniques and weapons. He doesn't like boredom and monotony. The black eyes would flash with a manic, joyful fire of anticipation every time Tobirama showed off a new technique or pulled off a new feint. He laughed maliciously, lit up with a sparkling flame, brighter than Kato. But these memories were overshadowed by something else. A slight smile, a relaxed pose. Head tilted to the side, eyes slightly narrowed. Quick, deft finger movements. Amazement, pure, innocent, a hidden note of bitterness at the bottom of the pupils. A steady, warm flame in the gaze. A smile, soft, mischievous, as if saying, I feel like it will soon be fun, and for me first of all. And it makes you want to smile back even if only with your eyes. Tobirama jumps down from the tree, throwing all thoughts aside. He pressed himself springily to the ground, weaving into the surroundings with the help of Sanchakra. He didn't need to be spotted, try to prove that he came in peace. Sliding like a shadow around the houses, built with all the meticulousness that only the owners of the Sharingan are capable of, Tobirama probed his surroundings with his sensors. Izuna's chakra did not stand out much from the other Uchiha, except perhaps in its power. Tobirama had managed to memorize its shade over the long years of acquaintance, but he still tried to be more careful. He did not want to accidentally run into someone similar and not so friendly. Izuna's chakra burned like a swamp fire in the house on the outskirts, which smelled strongly of herbs. He was not alone, so Tobirama carefully hid under the windows, listening. And yet, who are you planning to pour this poison on? Izuna's cheerful voice was the first he heard, accompanied by a quiet rustling. Tobirama frowned. Is this clothing with long floors? Silk? Satin? Yukata? No one, responded a suspiciously innocent child's voice with a completely unchildish mockery. It's just part of the training. A strange hissing sound was heard. Izuna giggled. Judging by the sounds, he was constantly moving around the room. He was dancing? Tobirama risked a peek through the window. In the small room, all the walls were covered with shelves with bottles, flasks, boxes, and books. Bunches of dried herbs hung from the ceiling. Next to the window, through which Tobirama looked, there was a table, and on it were scattered herbs, bags with powders, mortars of various sizes. With his back to Senju stood a boy of about 8 or 9 years old, who was cheerfully mixing something. The hissing and bubbling liquid was clearly not harmless. Izuna was spinning in the middle of the room. In a dark blue kimono with pink lotus buds, with the hem dragging on the floor, his hair loose, he was spinning, quickly moving his bare feet and casually waving his arms. His wide sleeves were flying up and Tobirama looked at his unexpectedly fragile ankles and narrow feet. And he thought distantly that the kimono was, in fact, a woman's. And that Izuna looked simply impermissibly good in it. Uchiha suddenly stopped. He tilted his head to the side and smiled warmly at the child. Go to my room and bring me what's in the basket with the blue pillow. If you would be so kind. The child, when he turned sideways, Tobirama realized that this was the foundling, nodded. After a moment, he carefully covered his potion with a thin cloth and quickly ran out of the room. Izuna sighed and looked out the window. Tobirama, he called quietly. Come in, I've spotted you. Hurry up, or the others will notice. Senju mentally cursed Izuna's Sharingan and sensory abilities, which were obviously no worse than his own. Keeping a calm expression on his face, he climbed through the window and inside. The Uchiha folded his arms over his chest, narrowing his eyes. Senju, you've become completely insolent, he said quietly, still indignant. What kind of biju are you wandering around our village like you're at home? Don't you have anything better to do? Good evening to you too, Tobirama replied calmly. You're spending your free time interestingly, Uchiha. I'm at home, I have the right, he shrugged. But if you don't start calling me by my name normally, I'll call you Torichan. Don't even think about it. I came to warn you. Izuna tensed, scarlet flashing in his dark brown eyes. We have idiots in our clan who decided to carry out sabotage. Tonight. An attack on the Uchiha, provoking a conflict. Opponents of the truce, Tobarama reported abruptly. Anxiety was spreading inside him like an icy flood. He had time, hadn't he? Izuna would believe him, wouldn't he? What is he doing? Warning his enemies. Something must have flashed across Tobarama's face, because Izuna suddenly stepped closer and placed his hand on his shoulder. He looked into his eyes. No Sharingan. Everything will be fine, he said quietly but firmly. Don't worry. No one will kill your clanmates. They won't even be noticed, believe me. Pick them up on the way back and bring them to Hashirama. The clan leader should deal with bullies like that, shouldn't he? Tobarama blinked in surprise. Uchiha was calming him down. He was stroking his shoulder, carefully, like a wild animal. He was speaking calmly and evenly, as if to a panicking girl. Almost comforting? Stop it, stop being a friend, stop being a non-enemy, stop being like that, I'm fine. Are you sure the sabotage will fail? Your duty officers aren't very vigilant. Izuna smiled broadly and mischievously. Finally squeezing his shoulder with thin but strong fingers, he took a couple of steps back. He waved his sleeves. You see, Tobarama, I warned Orochi not to let his snakes touch you, and that's the only reason you got through. But your clansmen are in for an unpleasant surprise. Orochi, Tobarama frowned in concentration. Is this your foundling? You called him Hebe, didn't you? And wasn't he younger? His name is Orochimaru, yes, it is him. And yes, at first I called him Hebe, because he didn't speak. And yes, Madara-san has already gotten on my nerves about this. Izuna rolled his eyes. How about you not follow his example, and instead take it on faith that Orochi is not an enemy? It's your problem, anyway. Tobarama raised an eyebrow. He frowned again when he heard the brisk footsteps in the hallway. Orochi entered the room, clutching something to his chest. He patted his yellow snake eyes at the grinning Izuna, at Tobarama. He chuckled, walked up to the ladder and held out something red and fluffy. This is for you, Senju-san. A gift. The child's voice was thin, with hissing notes. And the smile hiding in the corners of his lips and eyes was adult, harsh, mocking. Tobarama looked at the red and fluffy kitten with an extremely independent face. His hands reached out and took the warm little body. Meow, the kitten quickly climbed onto his shoulders and began to tread on his collar. Naya, he concluded, sprawling on Tobarama's shoulders. It's livable, the kitten meowed, clinging to the white fur with its claws. Tobarama, holding him with his palm and mechanically stroking him, looked at Izuna, who was hiding his laughter in his palms, with confusion. Orochimaru snorted, looking at him with interest. Well, the formidable Nidame is a cat lover. No, really. Now he's going to start cuddling this furry little pest. Oh my, Sue, if you only knew what a touching cat lover your great uncle is. Orochimaru pursed his lips, looking at Tobarama, who had lost all his menace and was looking at the kitten on his shoulder with distrust and at the same time affection. Izuna gave in and laughed out loud. Orochi narrowed his eyes. He liked Izuna's laugh. A pure, velvety, open sound. That's how people with a sincere soul laugh. That's how Jiraiya used to laugh. I think about them too often. It's not good. What does this mean? Stop gushing, Senju said weakly, not stopping to stroke his gift. Oh, come on, Izuna waved it off. He wiped away the tears of laughter. I've noticed for a long time that you're partial to cats. Oh, don't frown so much, you're terribly obvious. Hashirama advised you to get a cat in my presence, don't you remember? So I decided that if our idea of a truce starts to come true, I'll give you a kitten. Here, Orochi chose the cutest one for you. Izuna beamed again. Orochimaru nodded, although it's hard to call this impudent creature cute. But Tobarama seems to like him. Tobarama tried to frown, but he couldn't do it while his present was happily clawing at his fur collar. Orochimaru chuckled. Then he frowned, receiving a short signal from his snakes that guarded the village. Izuna, my snakes grabbed someone. Oh, and here come the saboteurs. Izuna narrowed his eyes. He pursed his lips, quickly glanced at Tobarama, and then turned his gaze to the window. Tobarama, let me deal with your idiots myself for now. If our guys notice you, there'll be a terrible fuss. And your guys better not see you either. If they see it, they'll think that Azuna and I are conspiring behind the backs of our clan leaders. And it doesn't matter who sees it, Uchiha or Senju, suspicions and indignation are inevitable. Tobirama easily understood his thought. This didn't cancel out the unpleasant bitterness in his mouth, but Senju could cope with it. Izuna waited for his nod, smiled calmly, patted Orochi on the head, and left the room with a light step. He's not going to go and deal with them in a kimono, is he? Tobirama muttered, watching him go. Well, Orochimaru looked skeptically at the slightly lost potential night aim. He looked lost only to people who had well-developed empathy or paranoia. For others, Tobirama should seem like an unshakable rock. He can do it, as far as I can tell. Izuna in a kimono does not lose his maneuverability and agility, but he gains in charm. Tobirama turned his thoughtful gaze to Orochi, who had meanwhile returned to his potion. He had no intention of poisoning anyone, despite Izuna's half-joking fears. This was really just training, a warm-up for the mind. You are not a child. Kami-sama, how perceptive you are, Orochimaru smiled venomously. If next to Izuna and Madara it was natural to be a child? Someone brighter? Then next to Tobirama all the poison that was hidden God knows where came out. Will you be reassured by the fact that Izuna knows, and Madara understands everything without explanation? In any case, these are not your problems. No, Tobirama snapped unexpectedly harshly. If we unite, then the Uchiha's problems will become mine too. Even so? Orochimaru put down the herbs he was carefully grinding in a mortar. He looked at Tobirama carefully. Tsunade had told him that her great-uncle was paranoid, but she had forgotten to mention responsibility and impartiality. Although Senju didn't shine with the latter quality in his time, since he was so actively oppressing the Uchiha. Well, he tried. Orochimaru cocked his head to the side. Tobirama was an intelligent, moderately paranoid shinobi, willing to take responsibility for solving the Uchiha's problems if they were in an alliance. Not that it went against what he knew. The Uzumaki seals happened to me. Orochimaru slowly left the table. He leaned on it with his hand. I stuck my nose where I shouldn't have, and as a result I rolled back my age. The knowledge was preserved, the skills, with an adjustment for a child's body. How did you end up next to us then? An accident. After the age rollback. I don't remember very well how I ended up there. Orochimaru winced. Actually, it wasn't a lie. He really didn't remember exactly how the transition happened. Tobirama nodded in concentration. You're starting to grow up. The condition of growing up is to know yourself. To fill the gaps in development, so to speak, Orochimaru decided not to hide this information. Tobirama is known as an inventor of techniques, maybe he will suggest something. I've never heard of such a thing, Senju muttered, thinking about something. Me too, Orochi snorted. And yet, here I am, suffering. Judging by the way Uchiha is fussing over you, it's more like you're enjoying it, Tobirama teased him. At my age, you understand that you need to look for the positive in any situation, Orochimaru raised his index finger instructively. And it doesn't matter that at his current age it looks strange. Yes? Tobirama looked at him with a fair amount of skepticism. And how old are you really? Orochimaru narrowed his eyes, smiling. Izuna did not ask him about his age. Madara, with whom he had spoken little and cautiously so far, nodded to his thoughts and did not bother with interrogations. Uchiha. Capable of accepting unconditionally or hating to the depths of the soul. How relaxing such behavior turned out to be. He had already become unaccustomed to such mistrust, interrogations, suspicions. 54. Orochimaru looked with pleasure at Tobirama's elongated face. For a shinobi to live to 30 is already a feat even in his relatively peaceful times. And now? 50 years is an indicator of intelligence, strength, resourcefulness, and many other qualities that allowed a shinobi to live to such an age. Tobirama took a closer look at the child? The dangerous shinobi? Whoever this man really was, he was not someone to relax in his presence. If you have retained the knowledge, then you are not helpless. Even in a child's body. It's true, Orochimaru smiled wider, looking straight into the red eyes. Then why are you here with the Uchiha, pretending to be an ordinary child? Firstly, because it corresponds to the condition of my growing up, Orochi lowered the corners of his lips. I didn't have a childhood. And this technique decided that I needed to fill that gap. Many shinobi have this gap. Yes, I know. I wouldn't have started growing up if I hadn't tried this time, this period, to taste, let's say. Orochimaru closed his eyes, smiling lazily. Playing with a ball. Listening to a bedtime story. Eating tasty things, enjoying the affection of women. Relying on adults. Simple joys, butterflies, flowers, snakes. Okay, the last one is not exactly childish entertainment, but do you understand me, Senju Tobarama-san? Tobarama's frown deepened. This all doesn't fit well with being in the Uchiha clan. Oh, you just don't know how much fun Izuna has with kids. And Madara is not a monster at all. He won't play, but he'll be able to keep the kids busy. And what will you do when you grow up? I haven't decided yet, I don't know, Orochi answered carelessly, boldly throwing a pinch of herbs into his potion. It hissed angrily. What difference does it make, Tobarama-san? In any case, I won't become an enemy to the people who sheltered me. Tobarama, still looking gloomy, opened his mouth. Did he want to argue? Try to get something out of him again? Orochimaru sighed mentally. How could Izuna stand this boring paranoid? Impossible, man. At that moment, the door opened. Izuna came back so quickly? Orochimaru was surprised, turning around almost in sync with Tobarama. But it was not Izuna who stood at the threshold of the room. Madara thoughtfully studied the frozen Tobarama with a kitten on his collar. Orochimaru, holding a glass of fizzing liquid in his hands. He glanced around the room, as if he was looking for something. Or, rather, someone. And Izuna isn't here. Orochimaru blinked his eyelashes in response to the lazily arched eyebrow. He went out on business. When he comes back, tell him to come see me, Madara asked casually, adjusting his home yukata. Orochimaru nodded, feeling Tobarama's bewilderment with all his sensory abilities. Yes, the home version of Madara could really throw you off track. Such a lazy, languid, even somewhat tired hypostasis resembled a languidly sprawled cat. In fact, most Uchiha resembled cats, and Orochi found this quite amusing. At least it distracted him from more complex thoughts. I will not threaten you. I will not pry the truth, ask questions, and the like. I believe that Izuna took care of this. I just want to warn you. I feel your strength. I feel how dangerous you are. Izuna trusts you, and so do I. Do not betray our trust. Otherwise, the reflection of the Sharingan flashed eloquently. I will not betray. Will you allow me to stay after I have fully matured, head of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Madara? Where are you going to get away from Izuna? The man chuckled cheerfully, patting him on the head. You're ours, Orochi. Orochimaru smiled. The words, you are ours, warmed something inside him pleasantly. Something that Sandaime, Jiraiya, Tsunade, even Kabuto had tried to reach in turn. But only 2 Uchiha managed to get there. And you, Madara looked calmly at the tense Tobarama, if you hurt my Otudo, you'd better bury yourself. Otherwise, I'll make sashimi out of you, and Hashirama won't stop me. Madara closed the door and left, leaving a stunned Tobarama and an openly amused Orochimaru. Why him? Didn't do anything? Orochi narrowed his eyes slyly. Maybe he decided that you were his secret lover? Choking on air and suddenly brightly blushing, Tobarama looked funny. Giggling, Orochimaru suddenly wondered where did Madara get such a bright hickey under his ear. Commentary on rustle of kimono and cat's purr. Author's speculation. If you have specific information about how old Orochimaru was before killing Sandaime, and it was in this segment that he ended up in the past for me, tell me. Regarding time, by the way. Maybe someone noticed Orochi's hands are healthy. I didn't mention it, but I threw him into the past in the period between the Kyuubi's attack on Konoha and the murder of the third. I still love you all, especially for your immense patience. I haven't been inspired for a long time, but once I watched Madara smashing the shinobi army in World War IV again, my mouth started to water and my fingers itched to start writing. The chapter is short, compared to the previous ones, and generally transitional. I hope I can write the next chapter faster. equals 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 shed skin equals 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 equals. Comment on shed skin. I've been gone for a long time. I'm a little ashamed, no. I was busy with another fandom, personal issues. In general, there was a lot to do. I can't guarantee that the next chapter will be out soon. Izuna really did go and deal with the would-be saboteurs in kimonos. Firstly, he was too lazy to change, and there was no time, and secondly, it was interesting to see Senju's reaction. Tobirama reacted to his appearance somehow insipidly. Although, there was some kind of interest emanating from him, there was some strange note in his emotions. Izuna landed lightly next to 5 people, almost strangled by the strong, heavy coils of the snakes. Hissing something clearly obscene, the pythons slowly unwrapped their bonds, allowing the Uchiha to look at the captives. Unconscious Senju in full armor. Izuna tilted his head to the side with interest. He had noticed these guys in particular on the battlefield, but they did not stand out in any way. I wondered what kind of sabotage the 5 of them were planning. However, it was up to Hashirama to deal with this. Tobirama was not happy about his clansmen being tied up in the same shibari technique. Izuna even thought that he would have gladly strangled them himself. But no, he quickly applied a transfer seal to them, nodded dryly in farewell and disappeared. Izuna was a little upset by such a bland reaction to his beloved self. But then he remembered the feeling of complete shock and stupor from Tobirama when he saw him through the window. Dressed in a kimono and dancing, and he was glad. Then he remembered the expression on the face of the mean Senju when Orochi gave him a kitten, and he couldn't help but giggle maliciously. That's it for you, Tobirama. At home he was met by Madara languidly sipping sake, Orochi concentratedly puffing over his potion, and a subtle veil of problems. Izuna literally felt with his skin that there would be very unpleasant conversations now. Orochi blinked his big eyes and assured that Madara and Tobirama had met peacefully and parted peacefully. He described their conversation in a loud whisper. Barely audibly, he suggested taking a closer look at his brother. Izuna was puzzled and took a closer look. So, Madara poured himself another sake, looked somewhere towards the window with a peaceful and sublime expression. Sprawled on the pillows, in a casually wrapped home yukata, he strongly resembled a languid house cat. A real cat, even. Izuna was touched, plopping down on a pile of pillows opposite him. Are you dating Tobirama? Yes, Izuna didn't argue or hide, crossing his legs and pulling a jug of peach wine towards himself. His favorite. With Senju Tobirama. Yeah. You know that this can be regarded as a betrayal of the clan? Then how should we evaluate your hikis, which are emitting Hashirama's chakra? Izuna raised an eyebrow. The dark marks were emitting, by the way, only for him. Most, if not all, Uchiha wouldn't notice anything. Madara calmly pulled up the collar of his yukata. Well. I just hope that your plans won't harm the clan, Izuchan. Don't worry, Nai-san, Izuna smiled. I've covered myself. Everything will be fine. With the support of Nakomata, with Orochi, whose combat experience clearly exceeded his own. And not only combat, judging by the terse reservations. Hibi desperately didn't want to talk about his past. He sincerely enjoyed his childhood and didn't give a damn about the fact that it was unseemly for a shinobi of his age to play with a ball, ask to be picked up, and eat pancakes with syrup. Izuna, however, Orochi understood perfectly well. He himself would have behaved exactly the same way. Izuna smiled softly at his brother. His instincts told him that Orochi himself did not understand how much his presence helped. How much Madara relaxed next to him. Even understanding that he was not a child at all, he behaved with Orochi as before. Played, communicated peacefully, cared. That wall with which Madara fenced himself off from everyone except Izuna, that armor under which he hid his fire, painfully blazing with the heat of approaching madness, was crumbling with every minute. More and more often, Izuna saw that boy who dreamed of a peaceful life and that the stone on the other side would still be caught. More and more often, Madara touched the old letters with an unusually gentle smile, hidden in a box, pushed away somewhere. Before. And now, they are on the table, and Izuna is sure that they were written by Hashirama. And he is also sure that if he looks into them, his ears will burn with embarrassment. Or not him. Because Izuna, of course, loves his Nii-san, but teasing a tiger is the most exciting thing in the world. Well, Madara slapped his knee and stood up. I hope you know what you're doing, and I won't have to play the evil brother and cut Tobirama into sashimi for your dishonor. Izuna choked on his sake. On the other hand, Madara said thoughtfully, his eyes sparkling with amusement, I'd rather sympathize with Tobirama. You can be quite the pest. Well, for my part, I can only say, Izuna smiled ominously, wiping sake splashes from his face, that I would very much like to see the faces of the elders of both clans at your wedding with Hashirama. It was Madara's turn to choke on sake. Or maybe it's time for me to call him son-in-law? Are you asking for trouble, Otat? Izuna pretended to be impressed and scared. Orochi, after thinking about it, also pretended to be very impressed by both the sparkling eyes and the menacing blaze of chakra. Trying hard to impress himself, he even climbed onto Izuna's lap. The younger Uchiha gladly helped him get comfortable and hugged him tighter. Madara snorted, finishing his wine. How could he be angry? All he wanted to do was to ruffle Izuna's and Hibi's hair, wrap them in a warm blanket, give them mugs of warm milk, and tell scary and funny stories, listening to their laughter. Madara hid his smile behind the cup. How long had it been since he felt such warmth of home in this house? As soon as Orochimaru relaxed and began to enjoy his situation, trying to take the maximum from his second childhood, his body began to gradually mature. If initially he looked 6 or 7, now he looked like a good 10. Izuna treated his growing up with understanding. A little bit pissed off by the elders of the Madara clan, he did not pay much attention at all. Having heard confirmation that Hibi would remain a good child, would not create intrigues either as a child or in adulthood, Madara accepted him and everything connected with him. This understanding, this acceptance, was surprising to Orochi. But that was Madara. As far as Orochimaru could tell, the head of the Uchiha clan had an amazing combination of intelligence, cunning, which was shown mainly in battle, resourcefulness in achieving his goal, and a breathtaking directness in everyday life. Why hide your feelings when communicating with loved ones? Why lie and dodge? Are you a friend? Then I will behave with you as a friend, accepting this as a given, unconditionally and completely. Orochimaru couldn't help but admit that he really enjoyed this. But inevitably, problems arose from the rest of the clan. Ayane, with whom Orochi had the most contact, except for his brothers, noticed everything, but kept silent. Because of her silence, Madara kept the woman in his house at certain moments. Well, and delicious food also played its role, of course. Although, if we accept the idea that Madara will end up with Hashirama, then Ayane will have to give in. Tsunade often remembered that her grandfather was an amazing cook. Kami, what kind of nonsense is creeping into my head? Orochi sighed sadly, playing with the snakes. The rest of the Uchiha clan looked at him with suspicion, whispering quietly. Theories of all kinds appeared, stupid as they were, that Hibi was a spy, a scout, that he was cursed or under the influence of a deadly technique. There was even an idea that the foundling was a yokai, that's why he had such snake eyes. And that he was growing so quickly because he was feeding on the energy of the clan leader and his brother. Madara, hearing this theory from Hibi, had a good laugh. Izuna, shaking his head sadly, calmly stated that it seemed like someone had a lot of free time. And extra whole bones appeared. Stopping all the gossip was Uchiha Takashi, apparently one of the most reasonable in the clan. He sometimes taught Hibi taijutsu and kenjutsu. More precisely, he pretended not to notice Orochi's talents and skills, playing an amusing game with him. I understand everything, but let's pretend that you are an ordinary child, and I am simply teaching you. Takashi admonished the gossips and paranoids with words like, the head of the clan knows better. His brother knows better too. Yes, more than you do. This child hasn't harmed anyone, and anyway, it's none of our business. To be honest, his sensible words were a balm to Orochimaru's soul. In connection with this, he had an idea, which he decided to quickly express to Izuna. Madara's younger brother had been actively corresponding with Tobirama all this time. Preparations for peace were in full swing. Pedant Senju had already thought of everything, the location of the future village, the development plan, administrative hassles. Orochi, who had looked into the correspondence and saw the village plan, bit his lip. He hadn't told anyone that he had traveled from the future, but it seemed he would have to. Otherwise, this feeling of nostalgia and longing, locked deep in his soul, would simply kill him. Orochimaru suspected that he had not just ended up in the past, but in a parallel world. It was unlikely that in his reality there could have been such a thing as Izuna and Tobirama conspiring for peace, and even actively encouraging their clansmen to do so. If this really was a parallel world, then, a lot could have changed. This is literally an opportunity to start life from scratch. Not as a Sannin, not as the White Snake, a cunning manipulator and cruel scientist. But as who? Who could Orochimaru become in this new life? Like many other things, Orochi decided to leave these difficult questions for later. When he was old enough to show all his strength, all his capabilities. In the meantime, it was possible to help Izuna with his plans. Our biggest problem is who will be the candidates for the post of village head, Orochi Izuna confided. The Uchiha was lying on his stomach, and in front of him were scattered sheets of paper with notes, plans, letters from Tobirama, drafts of his own letters. They can't be our older brothers, since they are the heads of clans. If one of them also starts running the village, there might be all sorts of rumors about the village head favoring his own and all that. The village head must be impartial, Orochi nodded understandingly, sitting down next to him. A feeling was growing in his chest that he could now participate in rewriting history in a different way. The way he needed it? Or simply more interesting and profitable? Tobirama and I can't either, Izuna sighed, crossing one item off the long list of names. The brothers of the clan heads, their heirs, and the only ones at that. Tobirama agrees with me. We must choose 5 or 6 people from each clan. When the truce is decided, we will hold some sort of election. Therefore, the candidates must be well known in both their clan and the other. And this is where the difficulties begin? Of the Senju, I know Senjutoka best, Izuna pointed at the list. And I like the idea of putting her in charge. She's strong, she can be impartial. She's Hashirama's assistant, so she understands administrative intricacies. The rest, well, if only Tobirama could tell me more about them, otherwise I only know them by sight. They got along well, Orochi suddenly concluded with surprise. You see, my old joke about a lover will become reality. Interesting feelings from this thought. It seems like I'm happy for Izuna, but it seems. Am I jealous of him? But he's not my partner and not my mommy who is jealous of the new daddy. Kami, when will I learn to understand my feelings? The Uzumaki and their damn seals are to blame for everything. Not noticing Hibi's mental anguish, Izuna stared in agony at another list, much more tattered and covered in scribbles. But the Uchihas are a problem. No, I'm sure Tobirama knows all of ours and has even already figured out who could be a suitable candidate, but I still know them better. And damn them all, practically no one can be called sufficiently impartial and competent. Izuna groaned and buried his face in his hands, dropping the list. Orochi picked it up and studied it with interest. What about Uchiha Takashi? He seems calm and sensible. And remember, he was the first to suggest that they could unite with the Senju. Reasonable, calm, balanced, which is rather strange for an Uchiha. Besides, he is one of the 10 strongest in the clan. Izuna propped his chin up with his palm. That's a good idea. Thank you, Orochi. Orochimaru smiled. How do you plan to pull it all off? It's not enough to just plan it all out on paper. First, let's all get together, me, Tobirama and our older brothers, and discuss everything with the clan heads. I suspect that they've been aware of all our plans for a long time, but for the sake of decency, it's worth letting them in on our little conspiracy openly, Izuna said cheerfully. Orochi chuckled, imagining this epic meeting. He'll have to persuade Izuna to take him along. Then we'll meet as clans. We'll talk, pit the elders against each other. We'll put the dissatisfied ones in their place. And then, when everyone knows that peace is coming, we'll start building the village together. Not a bad plan, Orochi nodded approvingly. But you understand that everything won't go completely smoothly? I sense a lot of trouble, Izuna chuckled. But we'll handle it. Orochi. We'll have Shinobi no Kami and Demon Uchiha on our side. We'll handle it. The strongest tigress can always be caught in the lousiest mousetrap, Orochimaru remembered Jiraiya saying. He had told him that long ago, meaning that even the strongest can be caught. Broken, killed, trampled, and thrown away. Orochimaru bit the inside of his cheek. If need be, he could discard the cute baby mask, revealing his snake fangs. The summoning, the sun chakra, the poisons, the techniques, he still had them all, and if a sword was pointed at the people he had chosen to call his own, who had accepted him, Orochimaru would be prepared to make their lives hell. Take a break from sad thoughts, Izuna ruffled his hair. Better tell me, what do you think of the name of our future village, Konohagakure-no-Sato? A village hidden in the leaves. Tobirama suggested something related to trees, and I liked the theme of shadows and mystery. So we combined them. For a moment, Orochi caught his breath. In his reality, the name Konoha was supposedly invented by Hashirama. But here, it was a joint creation of people who were enemies in his world. Tobirama killed Izuna. And then he began the end of the Uchiha. But here, Tobirama blushes at the sight of Izuna, is embarrassed by his bare ankles, and is glued to his thin, flexible fingers. Here, Izuna speaks warmly of the grump, giggles, and comes up with pranks. Everything is different here, everything is different. And that is wonderful, but why is my chest so heavy? It is so scary that this sweet fairy tale will turn into a familiar nightmare. What are you thinking about, Orochi? That everything could have been different. That, Orochimaru licked his lips. He found Izuna's warm palm with his hand and squeezed it. Everything could have been worse. Couldn't it? If it weren't for the idea of a truce, if it weren't for your agreement with Tobirama. Orochimaru knew how to speak beautifully and intricately. He knew how to wrap people in a thin lace of words, forcing them to change their ideals and doubt their beliefs. He knew how to speak clearly and distinctly, explaining the most complex concepts so that even the most stupid person would understand. But for some reason, now Orochimaru couldn't say what was on his mind. He couldn't say the most terrible thing. We are shinobi, Orochimaru, Izuna gently pulled him closer. We all walk arm in arm with Shinigami. What's the point of all this fortune-telling when we can create our own future? Don't think about death or what might have been, think about how to create the future you want. Raising his head, Orochi looked into Izuna's warm eyes. From his inarticulate babble, the Uchiha managed to extract the main thing: fear. Fear of his own death, the death of other people. Something that followed him from another world, time, from his very first childhood. From the very moment when Orochimaru first saw death, first learned how fragile, weak, and fleeting human life is. It was then that the thought arose, I want to live forever. I want to defeat death itself. And it doesn't matter at all, what he'll have to sacrifice in the end. What bonds he'll have to break, who he'll have to push away. The idiot Jiraiya, the little Tsu. The faithful Kabuto. The main thing is victory, and what he'll lose. Well, no war can be without casualties. You know, Izuna, it's good to be a child, Orochimaru said quietly. You don't have to be ashamed of your fears. Snorting, Uchiha lightly pinched his cheek. When you're fully grown up, you'll still be able to show your fears, feelings, emotions in general. Orochi chuckled, holding back his sarcastic comments. If you can't or don't want to do it in front of everyone, there's always me and Madara. You know we'll accept you. I know, Orochimaru smiled. That's why I fell in love with you. Comment on shed skin. Anyway, Orochi is growing up. Slowly. The clans are uniting. Slowly. Tobirama realizes he's in trouble with Izuna. Izuna and Madara are making fun of each other. Orochi is getting ready for puberty. Naya. I thought about it. Actually, initially Orochi was supposed to remain just another brother for Izuna. But it would have been unfair somehow. And I thought about it, it's bad for me to think, and I decided that there would be a threesome. It's starting to take shape already from this chapter, there are hints, yes. I have officially warned. P.S. I know, the chapter is very short. Unfortunately, I have no free time and opportunity to write right now. And the Naruto fandom is not so exciting anymore. The sponsor of this chapter was the trailer for the Naruto movie. It showed Madara for just a few seconds and, and this Miko sat down at 6 in the morning to finish writing the draft of the chapter. I hope everyone likes it. Extra. What must happen Izuna didn't flinch when he woke up from nightmares in the middle of the night. He controlled himself well enough not to give himself away. Not even his breathing was out of place, only the faint flicker of his Sharingan in his wide-open eyes. Still breathing steadily, Izuna moved carefully, testing how much freedom his body had. On his left, Orochimaru's arms were wrapped tightly around his waist, his long hair spreading out ticklishly over his bare forearm. On his right, Tobirama was sleeping, his arm thrown behind his head, his legs naturally intertwined with the Uchihas. It was warm and peaceful. The air smelled pleasantly of herbs and the bodies of his lovers, so it was no wonder that Izuna felt sleepy. Blood spurting from the wound. Metallic smell, nasty, salty taste. Disgusting crust on hands, face, hair. Izuna's lips twitched nervously and he began to carefully extricate himself from the embrace. Covering them gently with the blanket so that the warmth wouldn't slip away with him, Izuna paused for a few seconds, admiring Orochi's peaceful face and Tobirama's relaxed expression, for once not frowning. Then he smoothly walked out of the room, carefully closing the door behind him. On the veranda, he finally allowed himself to sigh loudly, squeezing the railing until it creaked. Konoha had been built for a year now, there were no more major clashes, everything was more or less in order. The Hokage was doing well, his older brothers were helping him as much as they could, indulging in debauchery in between, embarrassing both clans at once. Izuna chuckled quietly, scratching his neck, decorated with large hickeys. Well, Senju and Uchiha had to accept that the heads of the clans, as well as their younger brothers, had united much more closely than the elders would have liked. Everything was fine. Tobirama, that prickly hedgehog, had accepted both him and Orochi. Orochi himself was slowly letting go of his past, which was still unknown to them. But Izuna believed that one day Hibi would trust them enough to tell them everything. Everything is fine, so why? The eyes burn from using the Sharingan. The hearing strains to the limit, trying to catch the steps of enemies. The hands cramp up the handle of the sword, ready to strike to kill. Izuna? The soft, quiet response was followed by a light touch of cool fingers on his shoulder. Izuna turned around with a smile. Orochimaru? Why aren't you sleeping? Same question, Hibi narrowed his eyes. He slid forward smoothly, truly like a snake. He carefully grabbed the Uchiha's shoulders with his palms. Nightmares? Izuna winced, losing his smile. Orochimaru looked 20, outrageously young and fragile, light and ephemeral in his yukata and loose hair. But his eyes clearly showed his true age, reflecting his difficult past. He was painfully perceptive and never deceived by false smiles and assurances that everything was fine. Yes. I dream about all sorts of stupid things. Stupidity? But it scares you. So it's not stupidity. What are you dreaming about? A rustling sound on the edge of hearing. Silence that hits the ears. Howling intuition, expectation of a blow at any moment. It's like I'm waiting for an attack, Izuna whispers almost soundlessly. Again and again I prepare for battle, prepare to kill, or run away. I dream that I'm at our home, but I can't relax, I'm waiting for an attack every second. Madara is not nearby, he's far away, he won't help. And I won't help him in any way. Orochimaru gently pulled him towards himself. Izuna sighed dryly and hugged him around the waist. They were the same height, it was comfortable. Hibi always smelled of herbs. The bitter smell of wormwood and lavender always calmed him down. But not now. I don't understand why. Everything is fine now, Izuna whispered hotly. The village is thriving, our clans are living well and peacefully. New clans are joining us, and just wandering clanless shinobi. Civilians are coming. This is an indicator that everything is fine and peaceful here. Why do I have nightmares, like? You're always waiting for an attack, Orochimaru finished for him. He sighed and pushed Izuna away from him. He cupped his face in his hands. You're a child born in war and raised in war. In battles. Your entire life before was either fighting or waiting for battle. And the rare moments of peace seem too precious. Believe me, I understand all this too well. I grew up the same way. I've been through more than one war and more than one battle. One day, I'll tell you. I'll be waiting. And Tobirama too. I have no doubt. A quiet laugh. Amber eyes are covered by eyelashes for a moment. Izuna, my words will seem banal to you, but still. Your condition, of course, cannot be called normal, but it will pass. Everything passes, this will pass too. You will learn to live in peace. Like Tobirama, who sleeps peacefully, but during the day sometimes gives free rein to his paranoia, driving everyone around him crazy, Izuna giggled. Like me. We will learn, Izuna. I know, Uchiha smiled weakly, pressing a narrow but strong palm to his cheek. I want to believe in it. Just like I once believed in the coming of a time of peace, despite everything. That's good, Orochimaru stroked his head affectionately with his free hand. His bitterness didn't break through, that was good. He really understood Uchiha Izuna well. Orochimaru remembered how hard it was during the war, but it was no less hard to live peacefully again, without expecting an attack. Not only for him Tsunade could strike if you approached her from behind, and Jiraiya did not part with his weapon even in the baths. They stuck together and tried to live, just live. The funniest thing is that Orochimaru never understood whether they managed to escape from the crucible of war or whether they were just talented at pretending. What are you doing here? Tobirama was disheveled, hopelessly gloomy again and habitually glaring at them. Izuna snorted, trying to look nonchalant. But his personal senju, like little Hebe, age aside, he carried Orochi in his arms, was too perceptive. Nodding wordlessly, he walked over and wrapped his warm arms around them both. Izuna shuddered and hid his face in his chest. A living heart beat loudly and confidently. A familiar smell. This is safety. You're cold, you're completely frozen here, Tobirama said with a quiet reproach. And you're running around barefoot again, you'll be warming your icy feet on me again, he grumbled, turning to Hebe. Izuna laughed a little nervously. Everything will really be fine. Necessarily. Let's go back to sleep, okay? Izuna intertwined his fingers with those of his beloved. Orochimaru's graceful palm. Wide and reliable, Tobirama. Yes, indeed, how wonderful is a peaceful life.